Welcome back to my Higurashi Timeline series, where in each episode we will go over every single arc of the series when they happened, forming the ultimate Higurashi Timeline. This involves the manga arcs, the console arcs, the anime arcs, and the visual novel arcs. The last time we talked about the first question arc of the main story, Onikakushi-hen. If you haven't watched it yet, I'd be really surprised because it's been quite a while, but I would highly recommend it and the other timeline videos. Today we will be moving on to the next question arc, Watanagashi-hen. These videos are in no way meant to be a replacement for actual Higurashi media. If you wish to support the Higurashi manga, visual novel, or anime, there will be links in the description below. I'm sure some of you may have noticed from the title, but this video isn't just Watanagashi-hen. We are also covering Meakashi-hen. The reason being is that in the last video, I discussed Keiichi's life before he came to Hinamizawa to add some further characterization for him and help the arc make more sense. For Watanagashi-hen, a lot of what happens before the arc takes place is explained in Miakashi-hen, and the events of both arcs tell the same story from two different perspectives. Although technically they are different kakera, the differences between the two are so minimal that it would be completely unnecessary to cover Meakashi in a separate video down the line. Just like in my video for Onikakushi, I'll be covering the contents of the arcs and explain what actually happened, along with cross-analyzing the manga, the anime, and the visual novels, so you have the full context of the story. Deen notoriously has cut a lot to be able to fit in the 26 episodes in the anime, and both Meakashi and Watanagashi are absolutely no exception to this. In the slightest. These two arcs collectively are heavily butchered in their adaptations, with only half of the story being adapted, if they were even able to adapt that much. Because of the cut content, there are a lot of missing nuances, interactions, and key moments that help these arcs tick and really make the twins who they are. Lots of details for their backstory and how the Sonozaki family works that are in other media like the visual novel are just not present at all in the anime. Due to the cut content, and since most people seem to have consumed the anime over other forms, I'm going to try and cover everything that was missed, or as much as I can, because I don't want this video to be like 13 hours long or something. Miyakashi's visual novel alone actually is nearly 11 hours long, and Watanagashi is 15 hours long, meaning we are going to cover 30 hours of visual novel content for this video. Whew. This doesn't include the manga or anime adaptations for these arcs. You're in for a long one. Saying there is a lot to cover is an understatement. Be sure to get cozy, get some snacks or some popcorn, and don't be afraid to pause the video and come back to it at a later time. You won't hurt my feelings at all. Watch this video however it is best for you. Now, let's get to the bottom of what these arcs are really about. First, let's establish what goes on in the Sonozaki family. We saw in Kotohogushi that this branch of the three great families has been around for centuries, presumably, but the Sonozaki were once seen as the weakest of the families. The Furude family had Oka, who was backed by Hanyuu and Ryuugu technology, alongside the miracle medicine, and being the supposed incarnation of Oyashiro-sama. Needless to say, there were a lot of reasons they were heavily favored in ancient times. The Kimiyoshis at this point were very important to the village for some reason, it's kind of unclear, but naturally Shoji marrying Oka, a Furude, helped them hold a powerful position. The Sonozaki during Kotoho weren't seen highly since Mao, the head of the family at the time, was from outside the village. Just like current-day Hinamizawa, Onikakushi residents aren't big fans of outsiders. She does end up gaining the respect of the village due to her strong will and her ability to be quite cruel in dire situations, as shown with her not being afraid to torture the bandits who tried to steal Oka's medicine. This display of dominance and cruelty would become a core part to the Sonozaki family identity, and the local Yakuza would be adopted into the family's workings since Mao's family was a part of them. A long time has passed since the story of Kotohogushi-hen, naturally, and it seems that the Sonozaki family played a great deal into building Hinamizawa into what it is now after the original destruction of Onikakushi village. But it's not exactly clear how. This again could be cleared up in the manga Oni that's being released, but at the time of writing this video, which could have changed since I'm voicing this well after it's been written, that manga hasn't finished serialization yet. And even if it has, we can't really talk about it just yet in the series. A thing that seems like it could have helped, although it's never confirmed or denied, is that Orio's husband stole food from the military and sold it on the black market after World War II. This seems to be what put the family into their current place of power in the story, even if the food they've sold is rumored to have canned human flesh. Another piece of speculation we know about the family comes from Takano's document number 34, and says that the family notoriously has the highest concentration of demon bloodlines, meaning that either after the destruction of Onikakushi, Ryuun spirits were assimilated into the family more than others, or that at some point a Ryuun married into the family and forever tainted that bloodline. Regardless of how it happened, this seems to be believed by the village, as many of them live in fear of the Sonozaki. Although it's hard to know for sure if any of this is true or not, since Takano's information tends to be unreliable. What is true is that their power when the main story takes place is undeniable. The family is made up of a much larger Yakuza force, government folk in local towns and places like Tokyo, and of course, the main core Sonozaki who reside in and oversee Hinamizawa. With how the family branches out, they have influence over every decision made in the village, other local towns like Okonomiya, and even decisions made in places like Tokyo and the entire country due to their government relations. This power they hold is demonstrated best through the Dam War, as Oreo is able to have its construction stopped completely due to her questionable involvement in the kidnapping of the Minister of Construction's grandson. So the village knows that if they're to get on the family's bad side, they could end up in serious danger. This fear isn't helped by the family being rumored to still have these torture devices used since the days of Onikakushi, which, spoiler, they do still have quite the arsenal of torture devices. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the inner workings of the family, since a lot of it was under-discussed or outright cut from the anime. When it's time for the heir of the family to marry, the Sonozaki family would need to have a meeting and approve of their spouse. The reason being that if their heir chose wrong, their decision could leave a huge impact on their image and affect future political issues both in the village and outside of it. After having their spouse approved, the next heir to the family would be the firstborn child of the current head of the family, regardless of their gender. This heir would have a demon tattoo placed on their back at a certain age, either to metaphorically carry on that demon lineage or literally carry on that demon lineage. However, if the head of the family were to produce another child, this child would be killed. This practice was historically popular in Japan from the 1600s to nearly the 1900s, and it was called mabiki. It phased out largely in the country, but it makes sense that Hinamizawa would continue a tradition like this given their older belief system. Akane, Shion and Mion's mother, married a local Yakuza boss who wasn't approved by the family. After being confronted by Oreo about her marriage, they decided to settle this through a kendo match. Although we don't know the exact outcome of this, or at least I don't think so, it seems that Akane won since she was able to marry who she wanted. However, as a repercussion, she had to remove one of her fingernails and lost the right to become the family heir. Not being allowed to become the new family heir, Oreo would need to wait for Akane's firstborn child to pass on the lineage of the family's traditions. What she didn't expect is for another problem to arise through Akane. She gave birth to twins, Mion and Shion. According to Sonozaki tradition, whoever was born last, even if just seconds later, should be killed. Although, we know the family broke tradition, as both twins are core parts of the story to this day. We see in the anime and the manga that Oreo had the intention to kill one of the twins, but for whatever reason decided against doing so. To my knowledge, and I could be wrong about this, I don't believe we ever know why she decided to break tradition this one time, especially considering tradition is so highly regarded in Japanese culture. It's likely that learning about this is supposed to clue us viewers in about some of the themes of the series, like atoning for sins, because, I mean, like, come on, strangling the child of your daughter is pretty rough. It also helps support her future acceptance of outsiders since she had previously broken tradition. Regardless, an heir for the family was still needed, and as Mion was slightly older, just by a few seconds, she was chosen as the heir. The name Mion has a character in it that means demon, which signifies that she was born to lead the Sonozaki clan. Shion's name, on the other hand, had the character for temple in it, meaning she was likely to be confined to a temple, or their house, since she was never supposed to exist. Both twins were allowed to grow up and were essentially best friends. Something they would start doing at a fairly young age was swap places with each other as they are identical appearance-wise, just to mess around with their parents or the people in the village. It was a fun little thing for them. Parts of Mion's childhood were delegated strictly to learning to run the family, and Shion didn't think that was very fair, so their swapping game later evolved into a way to help Mion take a break. It was also because Shion was often neglected by the family, being left behind while Mion was taken to amusement parks or given good food to eat. One fateful day, Mion would offer to swap places with Shion because she really wanted to eat sea bream sashimi. Mion wanted to feel like a good older sister, so she let them swap. However, they would never be able to switch back again as they once did, as that day happened to be when the Oni tattoo would be inked into Mion. Since they had swapped earlier that day, the Sonozaki family had no clue they were actually giving the tattoo to Shion. Shion ended up receiving the Oni tattoo when Mion was supposed to have gotten it. From this point forward, their little game of swapping would cease, at least as it used to, as there now was no way to reliably swap back because of the tattoo. The two would have to swap names and never be called their actual proper names ever again, and the guilt that Mion felt was insurmountable. Just in case that didn't make too much sense, let me explain again. Shion and Mion used to swap places all the time until the tattoo was given out. From then on out, Shion would become Mion and Mion would become Shion. So, in the story, the Mion that you see that loves Keiichi, enjoys games, and is the heir to the Sonozakis was born as Shion, and is actually the younger sister. And the Shion you see who loved Satoshi, goes to St. Lucia, and goes level 5, was born as Mion, and is actually the older sister. Does that make sense? I hope so, because, I mean, it's only going to get worse from here. I think this is actually super interesting because if the roles stayed the same, where Shion was Mion and Mion was Shion, then Shion would become the head of the family. While Mion can sure lead with an iron fist at times, it's her compassion and love for people around her that makes her a great leader and a good friend. If Shion had taken over, it's more likely that the cold attitude within her would have grown, and odds are she would have ended up becoming another version of Oryo. In this weird twist of fate, even though Shion does go on to kill people in the arcs of Higurashi, it's their switching of places on this day that sets the seeds for Rika to one day be able to escape her torture, as Shion needed to be there for Satoko and the Hojos, and Mion needed to be there for the Sonozakis, Keiichi, and a lot more, to be honest. Higurashi would have been a much different story if this swap had never happened. Anyways, after formerly Shion, now Mion, had taken over as the head of the family, she would begin to sit in village meetings and eventually start speaking for Oryo in meetings as well. When the Dam War came around in 1974, the two both participated actively in the fight. Mion led the Onikakushi Defense Alliance, and as you might remember from the Himatsubushi-hen analysis, she often got into altercations with the police and dam workers. Shion, on the other hand, although we never explicitly see it, apparently got into very violent fights with police officers. However, while depictions of their involvement in the Dam War all vary depending on the media, it seems Shion is commonly described to be much more violent in her overall approach. After the Dam War ended in 1978, the Sonozakis would send Shion off to St. Lucia, a private Christian boarding school that only accepts girls, one we've all probably come to know very well because of Sotsu and Umineko. This is where Shion believes the temple character in her name comes from, as this is where she was to be confined. Publicly, the reason was since having twins was taboo in the Sonozakis, she needed to be sent away. But seeing as Shion lived at the village up until the age of 9, that's probably not true. The more likely reason the Sonozaki sent her off to St. Lucia is to protect her from the police due to her apparent violent actions during the war, since if she was caught, that could put the family under a really bad light for surrounding counties. At the same time of sending Shion away, Mion would be moved from her family house into Oryo's place to continue learning the family ways. Shion would reside at St. Lucia for 5 years. And it's only recently that we found out why she might not have liked that school so much, again referring to Sotsu. In 1982, Shion escaped St. Lucia with the help of one of the Sonozaki bodyguards, Kasai Tatsuyoshi, and it's after this that Meakashi picks up. Whew, man, that was a lot of background on the family, its inner workings, and the history of the twins, right? All of it is unfortunately very important for understanding actions taken by both Mion and Shion throughout these arcs in the series. So if anything didn't make any sense there, please feel free to rewatch that last segment. Let me take a quick break to highlight a creative person in our community, Hanami63. They make some fun Higurashi artwork like this one of Rika as Konata from Lucky Star, and they also have their own storefront. They have made some keychains for Rena, Sadako, and Rika, as well as one for Beatrice with some red truths behind her, representing all my Umineko fans out there. Not only this, but there are some bundles of stickers for both Umineko and Higurashi that are only 50 cents a piece. And all of the stickers look great. I had the pleasure of buying from them some time ago and got all of them delivered in an envelope with custom wax seal, along with a warning about there being stickers inside. Thank God, I was so scared of what could have been in there otherwise. After I opened it up, I was happily met with the keychains and stickers I purchased. I was also met with some surprise stickers of two of their own characters, Megami, who is sleeping so soundly, and Aiko holding a candy cane. They also sent me a sketch of Angie. Hanami must have heard I'm a big Angie fan. If you want to pick up something from their web store, it's in the description below. And please do. They've been extremely patient with how long this video has taken and deserve a ton of love for their amazing work. Also, as always, a huge shout out to Lambda Delta for uploading the entirety of these arcs to YouTube. If you ever want to read these for yourself, the links are in the description. Now, let's hop to the full discussion of Meakashi and Watanagashi. Our story starts with Meakashi, also known as the eye-opening chapter, which picks up as Shion escapes St. Lucia. Her method of escape was extremely calculated, mentally mapping paths with no security cameras, laying secrets of a student and teacher relationship to distract the students and teachers, with her being said student, arranging way early on to have Kasai come and pick her up, and looking for the best time of night to make her run. Out the gate, this shows both manipulative tendencies in Shion, but also her ability to thoroughly plan scenarios to get the best outcome for herself. After jumping the fence, Kasai is waiting to pick her up, and they quickly move away from St. Lucia. In this car ride, all three mediums seem to depict Shion pretty differently. In the anime, she is quiet and reflective. In the visual novel, she is rowdy and shrewd. In the manga, she is old-fashioned and hopeful. They all do encapsulate Shion as a character very well, but they each set the tone for what will eventually happen in this arc differently. One thing that I thought was funny is that in the visual novel we learn Shion cannot stand canned food. The reason for this is because when she was younger, Kasai would tell her horror stories about human meat being hidden in the cans. This is obviously meant to be a nod about how her granddad possibly put human meat in the canned food they sold. The visual novel also shows us both with her escape and the car ride that she is prone to overthinking, freaking out, or, as some may call it, tweaking. A little tidbit that isn't included in the anime about Kasai is that he may have loved Akane, Shion's mom. Due to this, he treats her with respect and genuine care, but isn't able to really express that because of the way the Sonozaki family operates, which has led him in turn to really care for Shion. Unlike most of the cast that has a strong attachment to Hinamizawa, Shion holds Okonomiya near and dear to her heart, which is where the two of them are heading after this masterful heist. While she's very happy to be heading home, she is aware that by returning to Okonomiya, she is putting her and Kasai's life at danger, since this would be directly disobeying Orio's order for Shion to live in St. Lucia. While they joke about ways that they could get killed, the possibility of this actually happening does scare Shion to some degree. The next day, Shion concocts a plan to pick up a part-time job in Okonomiya, so that she can start accruing money. She wants to pick up a job from her uncle Yoshiro, a family member who is very open about his support for Shion, and she suspects he'll still support her. To my surprise, the first step in realizing her plan is to call the main house and let Mion know that she escaped, which seems super counterintuitive as they were just worried the main house will find them and kill them. But that quick tension in the air dissolves because Mion and Shion reconnect happily on the phone. Mion promises not to tell Oreo about her breaking out, and the two further develop Shion's plan. Shion will pick up a part-time job again at their Uncle Yoshiro's restaurant, which is Angel Mart. And while she's on the clock, Mion will disappear from the public eye so that no one suspects there are two green-haired Sonozakis on the loose. After their phone call, Shion goes to her uncle's where he hires her on the spot, confirming he does still support her, although initially as an office assistant and not a waitress. Angel Mart is of course the iconic maid cafe from the series, and through Meakashi we learn that while Yoshiro is supportive, he is definitely a degenerate too, which isn't a surprise. The two catch up about what's happened in the village since she's left. The last thing to happen before she did was the dismemberment at the dam construction site and a married couple dying. As a quick refresher, this is when the director of the dam went level 5 and his crew killed him in self-defense, taking his body apart so that no one could be pinned for the crime. But since no person could be charged with it, it was dubbed Oyashiro-sama's curse. Of course, the married couple who supported the dam project are the Hojos, who are Satoko's parents, and they fell off a cliff. After Shion left for St. Lucia, the priest of the Furude shrine died of a mysterious illness and his wife died by drowning in the Onikakushi swamp. Ever since the first few deaths, Shion had come to believe that Oyashiro-sama's curse was real. She admitted that when she was younger, a set of rules were made, like if you left town you'd be cursed, one that was still talked about today, and why Rena believes that she was cursed. For years while at St. Lucia, in the back of her mind, she was scared she had been cursed because of this. Knowing now that the curse had continued even after she left did not ease her mind in the slightest. This conversation about the priest's death carries over to when she meets up with Mion for the first time in presumably years, where Mion reveals that the Furude priest was a fence-sitter, opting to not support the dam project but also not to join the Onikakushi Defense Alliance either. So in a time where the village needed unity and would cite Oyashiro-sama as their symbol, the very priest of Oyashiro-sama didn't fight back, and even protected the Hojos from attacks by the village. Shion mentions to Mion that she thought this approach was rather mature, managing to stay so level-headed with both sides around him erupting into violence and rumors. Thinking that they were still like-minded twins, Shion was shocked when Mion replied that this approach was not mature and he should have supported the village when they needed it. In the anime, Shion calmly tells her that she did become the head of the house while she was away, but in the visual novel she calmly retorts back at her, asking her why he should have kept how he felt a secret and gone with what the village wanted. In the manga, Shion snaps at her, making this seem like more than just a minor disagreement. All points of view go to show that while Shion was gone, Mion grew and changed into someone that she thinks resembles more of Oreo in ideology, which sets the seeds for future problems. Realizing the growing tension, Shion goes to clear the air by saying that while their separation has been rough, that she isn't jealous and doesn't hold anything against Mion. Although in her internal dialogue, she says that she's aware that Mion loves her, and she acknowledges that she doesn't hate Mion, but not hating someone and loving someone are very different things. This makes it sound like Shion is complacent with who Mion is to her. She ends the conversation by saying, "You work hard, Mion, and I'll work hard as Shion." These lines hit a little harder knowing the truth about who the two of them really are, especially in the visual novel with the emphasis on the pause before Mion calls her Shion, and where Shion later says she's a girl who escaped from the life that she was forced to live. You can feel there is this yearning between the two to flip the roles back to how they should be, back to where Mion was Shion and where Shion was Mion. But they can't. They'll never be able to go back to those times again. And Shion says she's a girl who escaped from the life she was forced to live is, of course, a double entendre. She was originally going to be forced to be the next family head, but by a twist of fate, that role was passed to her sister. But then she was forced to move to St. Lucia, where she fled the school. Both were elements of her life that she was pushed into, and both were ones she was able to escape from. With her new life in Okonomiya, would she end up being forced into another way of life again? Later, Kasai visits Shion to let her know that St. Lucia has contacted the main house. The family knows about Shion's escape. She talks to Mion on the phone about this while cutting her fingernails in the manga, foreshadowing at its finest, to see what the family thinks, and naturally, of course, Oreo is pissed. I don't know why she would even be remotely happy. They plan to hold a family meeting to see if anyone is housing Shion, but they're not going to search for her. Although it's not directly said, Shion realizes that this means the family is choosing to let her live on her own and supporting her presence. But of course, if she goes out in the public, she'll be busted immediately. The next scene is one that ends up being a reoccurring gag in Higurashi. Shion pushes over a rack of bikes that were parked by a group of delinquents. In the visual novel, she is spinning around feeling whimsical and hits them by accident, but then kicks them over because it pissed her off that it ruined her moment. In the manga, she walks into them and kicks them by accident. In the anime, the exhaust from one of them rips her bag of groceries open, so she angrily kicks them over. Then, the least intimidating, most incomprehensible delinquents come over to show her who's boss. Just like how the bikes were knocked over, each version handles this confrontation differently. In the manga, she pretends to cry and makes the delinquents mellow out since they're worried they hurt a girl's feelings. In the anime, she reaches to pull out her taser, the introduction of her weapon of choice that ends up becoming synonymous with her. And in the visual novel, she pretends to be threatened but waits patiently for the people of the town to come to the aid of Mion Sonozaki, since she's pretending to be Mion right now. But before they apologize to her, or she tases them, someone does show up to help her. Satoshi Hojo. We talked about him a few times in the last video, since a lot of the ideas of Satoshi were pushed onto Keiichi by those around him, and this is the first time in the entire series that we get to see him. For all intents and purposes, outside of some personality differences, he is just a blonde, more twink version of Keiichi. Or at least, that's what I thought when I started reading this arc. I don't know if I'd agree with that now. You'll find that out later on though. Satoshi enjoyers, strap in if you've only consumed the anime. We get a lot more of him in the manga and the visual novel. The delinquents turn their attention to Satoshi, and instead of fighting him, he just kind of stares at them intently. The delinquents end up throwing their punches and then booking it out of there. Shion and Satoshi have some friendly bickering after, with Satoshi completely under the impression that Shion was her sister. He didn't know there was a twin after all. The bickering turned into consoling, and then he gave her a rub on the head. To most people, and to myself included, I didn't really think much of this when it happened in the anime because I watched that first, obviously. But with the context of Shion's life that I've gathered working on this video, how embarrassed she gets from this and how it leads to her falling for Satoshi makes so much more sense. Shion had spent years being neglected by her family and from society as a whole, so odds are on top of the social isolation, she likely never received a drop of affection from her parents. Satoshi giving her this head pat, while it might seem small, opens the floodgates for emotions Shion didn't know she was capable of. He is the first person to really talk with Shion positively outside of Kasai and Mion in years, and he is the first person to show her affection in probably her entire life. This one simple moment is so much bigger than I could have imagined it was initially. That night, Mion tells Shion a bit about the boy that helped her today, although we'll dive more into it for the next timeline installment. After Satoshi and Satoko's parents passed, they moved in with their aunt and uncle who are big pieces of shit, to say the least. They were starved, verbally abused, and beaten. Because of this, Satoshi would often defend and help her where he could, taking the brunt of some of the abuse for his sister. Shion essentially asks if Satoshi is okay to Mion, and she actually has no clue. All she says is that he typically seems really spaced out or cheery, so she's never really questioned whether he was okay or not. Shion, on the other hand, has a gut feeling that deep down, he must be tired and that he must be saving Satoko just like how he rushed to save her. Their conversations move away from that as Shion is generally interested in him and wants to know more about him. She's self-aware of the fact that she's probably falling for him, especially when she pats her head, trying to replicate the feelings that he gave her. After their phone call, she realizes that as much as she does want to see him again, she's already walked into another situation where she's forced to live a certain way. She has to be a shut-in until she knows Mion is out of the public eye. How will she escape this time? Or will she settle in and go on to live this way? Sometime in the coming days, Mion had gone into hiding, which meant Shion could finally come out of hibernation. She got dressed up in an outfit that mimicked Mion's exactly and was going off to go shopping. Shortly into her trip, she stumbled upon Satoshi on a swing set, staring off into space and, well, to put it kindly, not looking so good. In the manga, Satoshi hears Shion's footsteps and freaks the fuck out. To me, this is meant to be a clear indicator that the stress of the home situation has already started to develop some symptoms of Hinamizawa syndrome in him. The reason I think this is because hearing footsteps is always a typical symptom of higher levels of the syndrome, and his reaction to the footsteps here tell me that usually, when he hears footsteps, he turns around expecting to see no one there. Also, quick aside, but I realized while writing this video that in the previous 3 timelines, I've never fucking explained what Hinamizawa syndrome was. Not sure why that's the case, especially given that it was a pretty important part in the last video, but I'll go ahead and explain it for those that have no clue the intricacies about the syndrome. Hinamizawa syndrome is a disease that exists exclusively in the town of Hinamizawa, and some surrounding areas like Okonomiya. The reason for this likely being because of the Ryuuns that we discussed in the first timeline video. The disease resides in every resident after staying in the town for an unknown amount of time, but lays dormant until something triggers it, usually high amounts of stress or leaving the town. There are 5 levels typically associated with the syndrome. Level 1 and 2 are typically classified as the same since the jump between the two is almost unnoticeable, kind of like the jump between Super Saiyan 1 and Super Saiyan 2. But nothing worth noting happens at these tiers except for them being maybe more susceptible to stress. Level 3 is when the mental state of a host tends to deteriorate, leading to them being more anxious or causing their stress levels to be extreme. Level 4 is when paranoia and hallucinations begin to creep their way in. Level 5 is when all hell breaks loose, and paranoia hits a maximum. Hosts at this point will begin to kill other people or themselves and experience a phenomena similar to the real-life sensation called formication, which is where a person feels like bugs or maggots are crawling under their skin. Since this is a disease, the person will typically feel this sensation in their lymph nodes since the body is probably trying to fight this off. But since they feel it strongest there, it often leads to neck scratching and sometimes piercing and gouging. A person in the town can jump between levels 1 and 3. Sometimes they can reach level 4 and come out of it, but usually once level 5 has been reached, it's game over for that person. I genuinely can't believe I just forgot to talk about this in the last video, but I hope this context for those that needed it will help make things more clear from now on. Going back to Satoshi on the swing set, the reason for his depressed demeanor is that he messed up a swing when he was up at bat for his baseball team. Satoshi seems to get in his own head a lot and doesn't want to let others down, so this being the reason he's upset here is very likely the truth. Shion gives her best Mion impression while cheering him up, which gets her rewarded in yet again another instance of physical affection. In the visual novel, this moment is especially sweet because it brings back memories of her from kindergarten. This tells readers that Satoshi is helping her to heal her inner child, since her childhood was unfortunately extremely rough. He retracts his head patting to Shion's disappointment because he needs to go shopping for his aunt. But not wanting her time with him to end, she offers to go with him since she was going to shop anyways. At the market, we find that Satoshi is prone to getting broccoli and cauliflower mixed up just like Satoko is, which is something not included at all in the anime. While this obviously isn't super plot relevant, it is likely intentional to include this similarity between the siblings. The writer of the franchise, Ryuugu-7, is known to have been a social worker before starting his career as a writer, and thus a point often brought up by his readers is the underlying neurodivergency of his cast. What I mean by that is in most of his works, especially Higurashi, a person could easily analyze a character for having something going on in their membrane. For example, popular theories are that Keiichi falls under the autism spectrum. Rena likely has schizophrenia and some form of depression, Satoko has some form of anxiety, and after Gotsu, she could easily be read as having ADHD. Basically, the number of neurotypical people in the main cast is probably pretty low in Higurashi. This broccoli and cauliflower bit is definitely a gag, but could imply something deeper about the character's psychologies. One popular idea I saw while making this video, although it has nothing to do with the mental disability, is that Satoko and Satoshi could have a form of colorblindness, which would explain why they both have it, as colorblindness is often hereditary. I decided to look into some forms of colorblindness they could have, and deuteranopes fit the bill pretty well, as people with this condition are likely to see greens as a form of yellow, something Satoko definitely does do in Higurashi. While it is for sure way less canon, Higurashi Mei, a gacha game released in 2020, also offers an explanation for why Satoko and Satoshi could get this confused through an unnamed mental disability of some kind. Ironically, through the in-game collaboration with Steins Gate. Makase Kurisu explains that since Satoko probably places things in the same mental category, her memories of them tend to get mixed up if she's trying to recall them under pressure, which would make sense, given Satoko is typically asked about the broccoli and cauliflower bit when she's under some form of pressure, like from Keiichi in the form of teasing, or by Takano as a more extreme example. This one also makes sense because, in the visual novel, Satoshi gets types of salts mixed up with each other, and he is for sure under some form of pressure because if he buys the wrong thing, his aunt will probably beat him for it. I know this is a pretty big random tangent to go on, but I wanted to expand more on this because I thought it was pretty interesting, and I thought, of course, people would also find this pretty interesting. Not only does the visual novel and manga help expand on Satoshi as a character, but it really does sell the chemistry between the two of them. Watching the anime, I didn't really get why people love these two characters together as much as they do. In fact, dare I say, I didn't really like Shion, and I'm definitely an open Satoshi disliker. Like earlier in the video, I was hating on him a little, but now I can say I'm starting to get it. I can understand why people like these two. During this shopping experience, Shion realizes that while Satoshi is reliable and strong, he can also be pretty stupid. She calls him chronically clumsy at one point. But because of this, she realizes more and more how much it must have taken for him to go out of his way to defend her. Then, as an inverse to the current dynamic, she is the one to pat him on the head. Although it's never explicitly mentioned either, I feel like Shion is enjoying Satoshi calling her by her real name of Mion, since it's the first time someone has done that in probably a decade. I wish this shopping scene made its way into the anime because it's really quite wholesome. I've noticed that, man, I wish this was in the anime is something I feel like I say a lot since I started this series. After the two finish shopping, Shion is rewarded with yet another head pat, and they bid their farewells for the night, with her being extremely excited to see him next time, which would be at his baseball meet, since she read about when their meetups were at the shopping market. Here, she brings some snacks and a drink for Satoshi while he practices, but is crept up on by Ire, in probably the most creepy way possible. He asks her to be the team's manager, imagining her in a maid outfit and then asking to be his personal maid. Naturally, she beats the shit out of him, but stops as Satoshi tweaks since she's beating up his coach. At the field, she learns that Satoshi is actually an insane baseball player, with a batting average of .300 or 30%. That may not sound impressive, but to put it into perspective, according to BaseballAlmanac.com, only 176 players in the entire history of Major League Baseball have had a batting average of .300. So that puts Satoshi in like the top 10% of baseball players ever in the history of the world, maybe even higher. Despite an amazing feat like that, Satoshi wastes no time in putting down the achievement because he doesn't manage to hit the ball when it really counts. Which, Eri does agree with him, that's the case. This could kind of tie in with him mixing stuff up under pressure. Perhaps he has a form of performance anxiety. Shion tries to encourage him, saying that while he is a good player, he needs to not be so kind to his opponent and to channel that native Hinamizawa demon blood to kick ass. And to further her help for him, she decides she will in fact join the baseball team as their manager, to make sure Satoshi always has someone in his corner. One thing mentioned in the visual novel that isn't mentioned in other mediums is that Eri actually personally recruited Satoshi for the baseball team, because he was aware of his home life and wanted to be able to give him an outlet to vent and free himself. Mion made the game club at their school for pretty much the exact same reason. While Eri definitely can be weird and sometimes a little pedophilic, at least he can be a good guy when it counts. Although alternatively, in hindsight, he could have just tried to get closer to him, noticing that he was developing signs of the syndrome, especially since he mentioned that it was clear Satoshi was developing a condition of some kind. Eri does expand a lot about caring for him and wanting him to play, so while I'm sure that was the case to some degree, it wasn't the entire truth. He does bring up the fact that lately Satoshi seems like he's getting sick again, which makes sense given we saw him freak out earlier at the swing set. The reason for this is because with his aunt, things have been growing a lot more worse lately, which if I were to guess, this is because of the cotton drifting festival creeping up. Since the Hojos and those involved with them had died in previous years, odds are the village had started to gossip or spread rumors about them being targets for the curse yet again. Lately, their aunt has been going after Sadako a lot more than normal, which is why Eri thinks Satoshi is getting sick again. In the anime, Eri mentions that Satoshi won't say anything about it because he tends to hold things in, which goes along with him caring a lot about others. He also says Satoshi has talked about quitting the team lately, which he believes to be because Satoshi wants to be around Sadako more to keep her safe. This conversation with Eri made Shion realize that Satoshi's whole life was affected by Sadako to some degree. Apparently, he gets along with his aunt. Sadako, on the other hand, is typically the target of her abuse. But as we mentioned earlier, he will step in and take blows for her and defend her. Her internal monologue in the visual novel reveals that because she felt Sadako was creating an environment where Satoshi had to get hurt, she feels unfortunately hostile towards her, and jealous that Satoshi cared so much more for her than he did for Shion. Which is a little crazy because, girl, you just met this guy. Of course, he cares for his blood sister. Shion firmly believes that if Sadako was mature like Satoshi and set aside her differences, then she could get along with her aunt and things would clear up for the household. Again, this thought of maturity. Obviously, this is an unfair thought train because not only is Sadako 10 years old at the time in this story, Japanese culture is notorious for being much harder on its women than its men. I'm sure being in the 80s and in the middle of the country makes this possible treatment towards Sadako no different. She mentions her thought train out loud, to which Eri reprimands her for thinking that way, potentially broiling her cover as Mion or making someone in the village look at Mion differently. However, this simple interaction with Eri sets the seeds for many things that will play out in this arc, such as the beginning of Satoshi's descent into level 5 and Shion's growing feelings of malice towards Sadako. Later that night, she excitedly planned out a meal that she ended up feeding to the baseball team a few days later. But during practice, Satoshi fainted. He recovers, but it's clear that he is extremely depressed. She wonders what she could do to help improve his mental health, and later at Angel Mort tries to cheer him up. But before food can even be served, he goes to leave with a custard in hand to feed Sadako. On his way out the door, he has a dizzy spell and almost falls over, which prompts Shion to be blunt with him about how worried she is. Which is good, normally. However, it ends up with her asking him to put himself first and try to forget about his family when he's out of the house, which means forget about Sadako. Obviously, he can't do that, so he bids her farewell before she can even finish her thought. Shion didn't know this, but this would be the last time she'd see Satoshi. She'd returned to the field a few times, but every time she did, he was never there. To make matters worse, she couldn't get a hold of Mion to see how Satoshi was doing, as the main house had limited phone access. Realizing that she was probably in contact with Shion. Kasai had also come to visit her less often. About to bike away from the field, a voice called out to her. "Rena." She was asking Shion to walk home with her, not knowing this wasn't Mion, and putting her in a position where she had to walk home with Rena to not blow her cover. On their way back home, a rainstorm popped up, so they took shelter under a bus stop. The same bus stop that Akasaka met Rika during Himatsubushi-hen, and the same bus stop that was the original concept for Higurashi. Shion intended to act sulky so Rena wouldn't ask questions, but this did not play into her favor as Rena asked her questions anyways, opening with if she'd been okay because Satoshi was avoiding them. This let her know how Satoshi had been doing and made her worry so bad that Rena got worried for her. Rena unpromptedly asks Shion if she likes Satoshi, and immediately she breaks down in tears, admitting to loving him. She didn't know how, she didn't know when, but he melted her cold heart. Rena asks Shion if she does love him, then to put on a smile, so that way he won't feel cornered. And that when he's done with his part-time job, then he might come back to baseball afterwards. Part-time job? Shion had no clue what she was talking about, but it turns out that he had picked up a job to buy Sadako a big birthday present. Even though he was battered and worn, he was continuing to push himself to cheer her up however he could. Although, this did not make Shion happy. In fact, it led to her having an outburst, actualizing her internal thoughts about how spoiled she felt Sadako was, and that she should just get along with her aunt so that Satoshi doesn't have to suffer for her sake. Which, you know, is fucked up. Rena's demeanor and mood changed in an instant. She says she won't look down on her for thinking that way about Sadako, especially since she loves Satoshi, but she admits that Satoshi is likely thinking how Shion is. That he opened up to her the other day about how tiring it is to be relied on as her brother, but he knows he has to do what he can for her, and that it's sinful to grow tired of caring for her. Shion admits to being jealous that Satoshi trusts her so much, but Rena dismisses that because she's experienced the same thing. Naturally, Shion is confused since Rena doesn't have a sibling, so she elaborates that the footsteps followed her. They would even come to her bedside and look down at her, and that she's aware Shion has probably never experienced what she's talking about. She asks if Shion ever thought of leaving town, of leaving Hinamizawa to a big city. With how she was acting, she knew she couldn't lie, or at least that lying was a bad idea, since Rena was acting quite scary, so she was honest about how she loved the area. Rena's reply made Shion's mind stop in its tracks. You'll be okay, if that's true. Oyashiro-sama won't get mad at you. Her mind went back to when she had talked with their uncle about the curse recently, about the rules that they had made when they were kids. Were those rules just a playground joke, or were they real? She found herself scanning her mind to try and find why that curse couldn't apply to her and wouldn't apply to her, since even though she had left the village, she had come back to it. She was safe, right? Surely she was safe now, but she couldn't help this fear she still felt about it all. Rena admits that she moved away for some time, but only when she moved back did she feel safe again. However, Satoshi, who is native to the town and still lives in it, is somehow being affected by the curse, which meant that somewhere within him, he wanted to leave the village. The bear he wanted to get Sadako allegedly cost 100,000 yen, which, holy shit, that must be the best stuffed bear ever for it to cost almost $1,000. Okay, Satoshi, high standards. But Rena draws parallels to that easily being enough money to run away somewhere far, which, yeah, I mean, it's almost $1,000. Rena sincerely hoped that after the festival when Sadako's birthday came around, that he had reconsidered leaving. This unlocked a new fear for Shion. She couldn't see him right now, obviously, with her family watching over her and not being able to go to Hinamizawa. But if he left town, then she certainly would never be able to see him again. Although the fear she felt more growing within her was that the festival was nearby, and that the curse had already happened 3 years in a row. According to Rena, Oyashiro-sama was already watching Satoshi. He could be subject to the curse. There were 2 ways that she could lose him permanently at this moment. Desperate for a solution, or to help the situation, she manages to finally get a hold of Mion and begs to swap places so that she can go to the Hinamizawa school, which Mion agrees to. She runs into Satoshi and Sadako as soon as she enters the school, and immediately, it's very clear Satoshi is a shell of his former self. He doesn't smile, his tone is distant and cold, and he's short with his words. She tries to get him to rejoin the baseball team, but he completely blows her off. During class, the two didn't unwind even the slightest. The moment lunch started, Satoshi went to leave as soon as he could to try and be alone. Shion tried to offer to eat lunch with him, but he pushed her away. In a small, emotional outburst, she asked why Satoshi hated her, and to my surprise, he asked her to look inwards at herself for why. This tells me that he holds resentment towards the great families. like the Sonozakis, for not doing much to help their situation, and for possibly being behind why his parents died. Unlike Shion, Mion is probably unfortunately complacent with the situation and her inability to do anything, especially since he's a member of the Hojos. Satoshi left her to her tears when Sadako crying in the room caught her attention. Aware that what happened wasn't that big of a deal, Shion let her already vulnerable mental explode on Sadako. In all three mediums, the way Sadako is treated by Shion is different. In the visual novel, Shion throws Sadako into a wall, grabs her by her head, and throws her into the wall, and she crashes into a desk, picked up a load of textbooks and threw them directly at her face, and while Rika begged and pleaded with Shion to stop, she grabbed a chair to smack down on the both of them, all while yelling at Sadako that she should die or outright kill herself. In the manga, Shion slaps her, slams her into the ground, throws notebooks at her, and Rika calmly asks her to stop as she goes to slam them with a chair. In the anime, Shion grabs Sadako by the head and slams her into a group of lockers, kicks her into a group of desks as the contents fall out on her, throws notebooks at her, and Rika goes to defend Sadako in a way that's similar to how Satoshi defended Shion, as she goes to slam them both with a chair. The reason I mention this is that there is a possibility that every arc is a different Kakera through every different medium, since things happen slightly differently. Or it could just be that they didn't feel like replicating the same thing again 3 different times. Each is possible. All of the scenes are absolutely brutal regardless, especially given what the siblings already go through on a daily basis. School right now, outside of Satoshi's job, is their only way to escape from their family's abuse. And now, they aren't even safe at school anymore because of Shion. Hearing the commotion, Satoshi runs into the room, pushing Shion into a group of lockers, checking on his sister to see if she's okay. He then has an extreme outburst, asking why they always have to suffer and be treated like this, why they have to be bullied by both the village and the Sonozaki family, and runs up to grab Shion by the collar. She replies, asking him why he protects her, that if Sadako grew up, he wouldn't have to suffer. He grabs her by the hair and throws her into a wall, holy shit, just like she did to Sadako. He asks what she knows about him, about either of them. How dare she say something like that after persecuting his parents and now the two of them? The Sonozakis enjoy bullying them. Why do they do that to them? I am by no means doing any of this justice, just listen to this quick clip from the visual novel. The emotions from both Satoshi and Shion here are so raw and so painful. They're both hurting and for very different reasons, but neither of which are their fault. Shion doesn't understand just how badly the village has treated the Hojo siblings. She's missing so much context and can't understand their abuse and situation. Her approach isn't the best here either, by any means, but you can understand why she acts this way to a degree. She was neglected by her parents and not even raised well, not even really raised at all. Naturally, she wouldn't know how to act here and would be prone to emotionally acting out. She never got the time to ever be a child, so she never got the chance to grow up, which makes what she's saying here about Sadako all the more ironic. Satoshi doesn't understand that Shion isn't Mion, and doesn't get why she's acting this way, and saying this about his sibling. How could someone who condemned his parents to die now go and blame his sister for all of his suffering, when they stood idly by 2 years ago and even engaged in hatred towards his family? He doesn't know that this person actually loves him and has his best interest in mind. All he sees is someone who started the suffering for his family and furthering it, making a bad situation way worse. In the anime, this moment is quick, fleeting even. It only lasts a few moments and doesn't leave an impact, in my opinion. But in the visual novel, it's really sad and painful. Shion wants to help Satoshi so badly, but she has no idea how much her actions have damaged him and made things significantly worse. Coming to the school, while she wanted to find a solution, has only pushed Satoshi further into the hole he was already in. Rena stepped in to mediate the situation and calm things down, but the damage had already been done to Sadako, Satoshi, and Shion. Realizing how much she fucked up, Shion left school full of regret and later cried on the phone with Mion. She has her fear confirmed by Mion that he does likely hold a grudge against the family, with Shion well aware that it was the Sonozakis that initiated the poor treatment of the Hojos. She can't help but be upset that he's choosing to act this way now. She wished he had acted this way out the gate, but Mion told him he didn't act that way because he was mature about the situation. A total inverse to how Shion views maturity. He was angry upset. But he put that to the side to show her nothing but kindness and compassion. It was because of that she fell in love with him, but now he'd grown tired and couldn't hide his bias towards her. This conversation loops around to the conversation they had at the beginning of Meakashi about the Furude priest not being mature because he didn't go along with the village. The Hojo family, to the village and in Mion's eyes, didn't act maturely because they didn't go along with what other villagers believed. Mion doesn't believe this to be the wrong way of thinking because she's grown accustomed to the way the village operates and what her family wants. But to Shion, who by all means is an outsider to the village outside of her DNA, cannot understand this thought train, and I get why. In simple terms, the way the village thinks here is adjacent to that of a mob mentality, and Shion isn't a part of that mob. Shion presses Mion about why Satoshi has to suffer too, even though he didn't do anything, but instead of answering, Mion just hangs up the phone. Days pass, and Shion doesn't leave her apartment, or even move out of bed for that matter. She only gets up when Kasai shows up with some food, which she devours because the girl hasn't eaten in days. While there, Kasai explains some information about Satoshi's situation. We learn that Teppei has fled the city and is staying with his mistress in Okonomiya, who we meet in the next arc as Rena, although technically she's introduced in Tomitake-hen just as a dead corpse. His leaving angers the aunt so much that her abuse is ramped up a lot, so much so that neighboring households are beginning to spread rumors. Shion is upset that their family isn't doing anything to save them, but then it occurs to her that coincidentally the victims of every festival are usually those that oppose the Sonozakis. So, she naively asks Kasai if they've chosen the upcoming victims for this year's curse, hoping that Satoko and her aunt will go missing. He simply replies that he doesn't think something like that happens, and if it does, he has no clue about it at all. But Shion continues to believe that Oryo must be behind the curse each year before conking out from all the food she ate. Her slumber is woken up by a phone call, Mion, at a very familiar payphone. She's forwarding to Shion that Satoshi called. Obviously, not for Mion, because he wanted to apologize for something that happened the other day, which means it was for Shion. I find it a little odd that he wants to apologize when Shion was literally attempting to kill his sister, but that's besides the point. In the manga, it does a really solid job illustrating how dire the situation actually is. Mion can't get through to him anymore. Shion is their last bastion of hope to actually make an impact and try to break through to Satoshi. If she can't, who knows what will happen. I do believe that Mion wants to help Satoshi, but she can't do anything like that without the help or permission of her family. Her inability to do anything clearly weighs heavily on her after she hangs up the phone. Shion gets Satoshi's number from Mion, dials him up, and is filled with relief as the one she's speaking to right now doesn't sound like the Satoshi she saw at school recently. It sounds like the one she first met. She listens to his apology because while he does hold resentment toward the Sonozakis, Shion wasn't the one who decided that. She asks if he's okay, and he says that he is, but Sadako has it really hard, to which she asks if Sadako is okay. This pisses Satoshi off naturally because he assumes that Mion would see how she is every single day, even though Shion was asking genuinely, because she has no idea. She has a rare moment in the visual novel where she realizes that her hoping for Sadako to die isn't right, given that Satoshi is doing everything for her. Sadako dying would do nothing but push Satoshi farther in the hole. Satoshi then asks if she can take Sadako to the cotton drifting festival the next day, and while she's down to do it, she questions why he can't do it himself. He claims he's doing something work-related, and she knows that he's definitely lying, but doesn't want to take an opportunity where he's relying on her for granted, so she agrees. Then he gets a little weird on the phone, asking if Shion believes in Oyashiro-sama's curse, and confesses that he did originally think about leaving the village, but decided against it, although he hasn't been forgiven just yet. She tries to reassure him that there is no curse, but instead of reassuring him, he ends up reaffirming that there is some kind of curse or conspiracy that he plans to fight back against. He won't disappear until he buys that teddy back home, so he tries to wrap up the call quickly, but even though he could be at risk staying on it any longer, he makes sure to ask her to take care of Sadako. Instead of agreeing to, she stayed silent because she didn't actually want to do anything with Sadako. She firmly believes Sadako is still the root of all evil in Satoshi's life. Why would she want to take care of someone like that? This disappoints him clearly, and he hangs up right afterwards. With that, Shion is left to her own devices, and only able to forward the message to Mion. I'll go more in depth about it in the Tomitake-hen video, but to save some video time and needless explanation, we will largely not talk about the festival this day and Oishi's investigation of Satoshi. Of course, we learn that the curse seems to have struck again, with Satoko's aunt as the victim. At the festival, the Sonozakis are made aware of the crime far before the police report on it. Oryo seems to fully believe in the curse also, since she tells Kimiyoshi that those who respect Oyashiro-sama won't ever be involved in something like what happened. Mion calls Shion to inform her of what happened, so she asks if Satoshi had an alibi of some kind. Naturally, he didn't, so Shion convinces Mion to give him one. He was at the festival. Of course. Shion convincing Mion to give Satoshi an alibi here completely explains an event in a later arc. In Tomitake-hen, Teppei returns to the village and Keiichi kills him on the night of the festival. To avoid suspicion, all of his friends cover for him by saying he was there at the festival. Although it wasn't their intention, this freaks him out because it makes him question his actions that night. Was he actually at the festival instead of killing Teppei? We know now the reason that they did this, because when they couldn't provide an alibi for Satoshi, we all know he disappeared a few days later. So by providing Keiichi an alibi, they're hoping he doesn't disappear. A cool little explanation for a previous arc's question. They don't call them answer arcs for nothing. They agree to pretend to switch places for Shion to go to work, but this ends up being a horrible mistake because there are police camped around the Sonozaki estate. They would notice if Mion left the house or not, so Mion showing up in Okonomiya would make no sense. Regardless, she does leave her apartment to go to work, and ends up bumping into Satoshi outside a store. Through a brief conversation with him, she can easily tell that the person who murdered her aunt must have actually been Satoshi, since he seemed to feel very accomplished. Even if he had committed a murder, she was happy that a weight had clearly been lifted off of his shoulders. The store he was outside was actually a toy store, and inside was the giant teddy bear he had been hoping to buy. To make sure the bear wouldn't be sold, the two go in and reserve it. Although the man behind the counter is clearly too old to be working there, odds are he will not remember this. The two walk outside right into Oishi and a group of officers. Shion urges Satoshi to leave, but he is quite literally frozen stiff. To help Satoshi like he once helped her, Shion offers that his alibi was being with her, and she reveals herself publicly to be Shion Sonozaki. Taken aback at first by Mion potentially having a twin sister, they end up believing her and taking her in for questioning along with Satoshi. Although her questioning is cut short as someone has shown up to retrieve her, which Shion realizes is likely the Sonozakis. She braces herself for some extreme form of punishment as she walks into the car and rides over to the estate. Once at the house, she is both met with and shocked by the demeanor of an extremely cold, deadpan Mion. The anime grazes by this, but in the anime, and especially the manga, they let you see just how unlike this presentation is to the Mion we all know and love. Their exchange out front was short, one-sided, and ended once Shion realized she was being taken back to where the old torture chamber was, full of tools they used to use back during the Onikakushi days, and so far known to be used against bandits that tried to steal Oka's miracle medicine. After walking in and seeing the tools for herself, Shion realized how underprepared she was for this to actually be real, and how much she actually fucked up. In the anime, Oryo is incredibly pissed at Shion for revealing herself, especially in the name of saving a Hojo. For whatever reason, Kimiyoshi is present. In the manga, Oryo is actually unfathomably angry. She's actually kind of terrifying. In the visual novel, Oryo sounds more disappointed in Shion than angry. Shion even realizes herself that Oryo was never going to interfere with Shion's life, but once the police were involved, she was forced in a position to impose punishment upon her, especially because she defended a Hojo. The visual novel does a good job setting up reasonable expectations for Oryo eventually turning over a new leaf and accepting outsiders like Keiichi, and forgiving the Hojos for Sadako since she was willing to openly break traditions and let Shion live freely. Of course, she still has her responsibilities, thus holding the Hojos at fault, but the manga and the anime do not set the expectation for that potential switch for Oryo very well at all. The anime does omit that the reason Oryo is probably mad is that she's aware Satoshi killed her aunt, and Oryo seems to not be in support of that. Shion goes to try and defend Satoshi, blowing up at Oryo and admitting to how she feels about Satoshi, and while the family actually seems to kind of understand or sympathize with her, at least in the visual novel. Mion especially agrees that Shion is probably right, but they have a reputation they have to uphold. In the manga, no one seems to remotely understand Shion, and Mion is still incredibly cold towards her, saying that no one can support her anymore. she still has to pay for what she has done and give restitution for those that she has gotten involved with her. To prove how serious they are, Kasai and her uncle have actually been captured and put in a cell until Shion gives restitution. In the visual novel, she realizes that getting so many people involved, and so deeply with her, was completely her fault, and she decides to swallow her pride when Satoshi will likely be involved too. In the manga and anime, she seems to only really care when Satoshi is mentioned and not the others, those mediums painting her more in a vain light. We all know what comes next. No matter which medium you consume, the next sequence is inevitable and infamous. Shion is tasked with using a tool to remove 3 of her fingernails. One for Kasai, one for Yoshiro, and one for Satoshi. In the anime, it's a fucked up sequence that, while freaky to the eye, is quick, obviously iconic, and it's insane how the rest of the family just sits by and watch for sport. In the manga, her pain is illustrated so intensely that it's enough to make your skin crawl, and her determination to continue the process despite the pain she's feeling is admirable, yet psychotic. You can tell just how freaked out and panicked she is. Honestly, it's a lot more rough to go through than the anime. In the visual novel, this scene is full of mental anguish, anticipation, and panic for the pain she's about to feel, on top of her bleeding heart for those that she cares about, but realizing that while she cherishes her uncle and Kasai, in one action, she indirectly told the 2 of them that she cares more for Satoshi. This, I mean, being her revealing herself as Shion. The look into her internal dialogue makes this scene so much more powerful than it is through the other 2 mediums. The entire process is so hard to read through because all of what she's feeling is so real and raw. I wish the anime could have spared more than a few minutes on what has come to be one of the most iconic scenes in the whole franchise. Anyways, as we know, the second nail doesn't go so well, so they cover her head and do the 3rd nail for her, freaking her out so badly that she falls unconscious. Because of her sacrifice, the Sonozaki decide to withdraw Shion from St. Lucia, sending her to a school in Okonomiya with some clear conditions, like staying out of the public eye. Down the line, to abide by this rule, she wound up quitting her job at Angel Mart. Kasai and Yoshiro were forgiven and unharmed. However, for Satoshi, the family still wishes for Shion to forget about him and move on. While she doesn't like this, she does realize that for Satoshi's safety, it might be best to stay clear of him for some time. Even still, she found herself going to the toy store to see if that bear had been bought, which it had. She definitely felt sad, but she felt relieved that Satoshi had managed to accomplish all of his goals and move forward towards the path of a better life. At the store, she runs into Ire, which she formally introduces herself, and he welcomes her to come back to the team whenever she sees fit. After this encounter, she runs into Oishi, who invites her to the police station for some coffee, instead of placing her in an interrogation room. There, he reveals to Shion that Satoshi went missing sometime after withdrawing all the money from his bank account. We of course know that Satoshi was put in a coma under the Ire clinic, but no one else knows that. Oishi believes that Satoshi skipped town due to pressure from the Sonozaki, not because of her feelings, but because they didn't want the family to be associated with a murder, which is an assumption that could make sense given how Oreo is acting in the visual novel. In Hinamizawa, they associate his disappearance with the curse, but Oishi assures Shion that Satoshi was more than likely alive since one of their sources saw him boarding a train. This claim in the overall scheme of things seemed to be false since there is nothing to ever support it outside of a tip, but tips in the visual novel aren't always the truth. Kasai tells Shion that someone allegedly claiming to have been the murderer of Satoshi's aunt has popped up, but before they could be interrogated, they kill themselves by swallowing a spoon. It's hard to say who exactly this person is, or if they're even relevant, but my guess is they're someone the Mountain Dogs killed in an attempt to make sure the police didn't keep searching for Satoshi. If they had, they might have uncovered the truth about the Ire clinic. No matter what it's meant to be, it's a red herring for sure to steer away from Satoshi having committed the crime. All of these recent events had gotten Shion worrying about Oyashiro-sama's curse again. At the library in Okonomiya, she attempts to sort her thoughts out. There was a clear line that could be tracked from year 1 to year 4. Year 1 involved the death of the dam manager, which was the enemy of the village. Year 2 involved the death of the Hojos, which were the traitors of the village. Year 3 was non-cooperatives, or protectors of the traitors. And in year 4, the victims were the relatives of the traitors. Whoever ended up dying every year for the curse was in a way like the restitution she had made to the Sonozaki family. But she didn't believe the Sonozaki were behind it. It was undeniable to her that there was some type of agenda being pushed with these deaths, and she figured someone was urging these people to kill. or involved in these disappearances and murders to some degree. This thought train leads her to believe that someone set Satoshi up, or at the very least, saw from a mile away that Satoshi was going to kill his aunt and simply let it happen. As she wonders who made Satoshi disappear, or who is causing the incidents, the cause for it all appears right behind her: Takano. Going back to reinvestigate the series while knowing the ending makes moments like these incredibly ironic, because Shion doesn't realize it, but the answer to all of her questions was right next to her. Takano has a brief conversation with Shion where she helps her realize that there's typically 2 victims per year for the curse rules. One dies and one disappears, or is demoned away into Onikakushi Swamp. She says this is a way the village can get rid of 2 problematic people at once. She also explains the origin of the Cotton Drifting Festival as the Intestine Drifting Festival, and just like she does for Rena, she lends Shion her notebook. Shion doesn't realize this, but this is a clear manipulation on Takano's part. Throughout their whole conversation, Takano is definitely aware of who Shion is, what has happened to her recently, and her relationship to her family. Shion was already doubting her faith in her family, but by putting suspicion in her head through the scrapbook and other various backstories about the village, Takano has pushed that faith into life support. There is no reason she would trust her family anymore after reading this notebook. She decided to dump her night into reading and studying Takano's notebook, but didn't manage to get very far because Mion showed up at her place. Initially, she's a little freaked out, but that seems to subside as they have a pretty pleasant conversation. They talk about some mundane stuff like how her new place is, how is life, how's her new school, and she checks on how her hand is doing after the stunt at the Sonozaki household. Mion certainly does not seem to be proud of what went down, apologizing to Shion for it. She realizes that the head of the house, Mion, and her sister, Mion, while the same person, feel like 2 very different people. The way she describes it, as if the demon tattoo on her back manifests itself onto Mion as a different persona, which in a way is ironic since that's kind of adjacent to how Hinamizawa syndrome works. Their pleasant conversation comes to a quick halt when Mion mentions wondering where Satoshi went off to. This sentence triggers an abundance of emotions within her, that festering doubt about the Sonozaki family being involved in his disappearance bubbling its way up to the surface. Quote, "If anyone could know, it's you," were her last thoughts before lunging at Mion, attempting to strangle her. While strangling Mion, she finds the words to be coming out of her. She doesn't have control of what she's saying. Quote, "Are you saying that Oyashiro-sama's curse demoned him away? There can't be a curse. That's a lie. You demoned him away. Give him back," are all things she's saying with absolute, pure intent to kill written all over her face. Her internal monologue says a demon has woken up deep within her and is controlling her now. At one point, she almost admits that she's the one strangling Mion, but reverts back to the demon being the one to commit this act. This is rather interesting. The visual novel helps paint a picture for us that the other mediums don't, which is that Shion could have some form of personality disorder given how easily her emotions tend to flip up. Antisocial personality disorder is one that could fit her, with some of the typical traits being often lying, stealing, using false names and conning others. The person is aggressive and often violent, behaving impulsively, has repeated run-ins with the law, which all of these are true to varying degrees regarding Shion. She uses Mion's name in public and is forced to always use a name that isn't actually hers because of the childhood swap. Later on, she does steal and manipulate those in her family and around her very easily. She is obviously easily violent and aggressive, and we know she has many run-ins with the cops during the Dam War, and since coming back to Hinamizawa, she has had a few encounters with them. Another interpretation is that this demon obviously isn't real, and it seems to be a way that she can do these things and not put the blame on herself. But if we are taking this literally and that the demon is real, it could be manifesting itself since she is technically the eldest, the one who should hold the tattoo. Mion, unlike the history of apparent Sonozaki members, is calm, friendly, and forgiving. Sure, she was cold that one time to Shion, but she's not normally this way. This could be because the demon, whatever it is, doesn't belong to her. It belongs to Shion. Any possibility for this could be true, as Shion is seen in both the visual novel and the manga having a conversation with the so-called demon that lives within her. A battle that, mind you, it feels like she almost lost even though it was entirely in her own mind. These behaviors might all sound familiar because they are typically associated with being a sociopath. Regardless of possible explanations for this behavior, Mion tries to grab Shion's hands to make her stop, in the process revealing that she also took off 3 of her own nails. Not feeling that it was right that only Shion had to go through with what she did, Mion atoned for the same things. Mion did whatever she could to help Shion be happy once she came back because it wasn't fair to Mion that Shion was the one who always had to suffer. In the visual novel, it's implied that Mion also loves Satoshi, but stepped aside so that Shion could be happy. In Shion's arms, she sobbed about how she begged for Oreo to let the two be happy, and she was going to. But all of that was for nothing because of Satoshi's disappearance. No one in the family knows where he went. Even though she was just being strangled, Mion still dismisses her own pain because of how much Shion seems to have suffered. Then she begs and cries to not want to be the successor to the family, that she's not a demon, she just wants to be a human and an equal to Shion. This is a really sad moment because this is one of the only times we get to see Mion vulnerable and open up about not wanting this responsibility, finally getting the chance to act like the younger sister. All around, it just feels like such an amazing scene. I don't think the anime does this one justice because Mion's VA has many lines to work with in the visual novel, and in the manga, seeing Mion full-on sobbing and breaking down is just heartbreaking. We never get to see characterization for Mion like this in the anime, and I'm glad we got to see it here. She is dependable and so selfless, putting her own needs far below those of her sisters. We also get some amazing characterization for the so-called demon that resides in Shion. In the anime, I found moments where she started referring to herself as a demon as kind of random, but with the context of the visual novel and the manga, it makes so much more sense to me. With that, the setup for Meakashi comes to a close. Around 10 hours of visual novel content was summed up in an episode and a half in the anime, and after reading, I can finally see how much they've butchered. Satoshi is a character that I always clowned on, but now I love him. He might be one of my favorite characters in the series. His struggles are so human, and his desire to do whatever he can for his sister despite the situation he was placed in is just so admirable. Satoshi enjoyers, I get you guys now. I would like to formally apologize for clowning you for the last few years. You're based. I appreciate you. I understand. Reading this in Meakashi has made me so pissed that we see him wake up for just a moment in Sotsu and never see the outcome of it. And don't even get me started on Shion. There is so much lacking in her on-screen development for the anime that the manga, and especially the visual novel, patch up so much. I now think infinitely higher of her than I did before, and we're only halfway through the arc. It's time to finally introduce Watanagashi-hen. Similar to what I did with Onikakushi-hen with Sumihoruboshi-hen, I will be comparing the two side by side to give you the full, accurate play-by-play for what is happening in these arcs. Before we get started on the next half of this video, this is your brief intermission, and I do mean brief. It's about to be a lot of information from here on out. Please pause the video to go to the bathroom, get some more snacks, eat food, or if you need to, you can come back and watch this video later. Do whatever you need. And with that, let's get back to it. Although I'm not exactly sure when, Shion meets Keiichi right before a bulk of what Watanagashi-hen covers. The circumstances that they meet are a direct parallel to how Shion met Satoshi, with her knocking over a set of bikes and him coming to the rescue. This sets up the beginning of very conflicted feelings brewing in Shion, as right before Keiichi appeared, she started a fake cry in hopes of Satoshi showing up, because she noticed how similar the situation was. In the anime, when Keiichi first showed up, she was actually very convinced Satoshi was the one that came to the rescue. The way this situation plays out is super different in the anime than in other mediums, where he ends up being skittish and then tripping over one of the punks, with them fleeing as Okonomiya residents come to help. In both the visual novel and the manga, Keiichi offers to compensate them somehow, which the grunts decide Shion's body would be the best remedy. They talk about stripping her down completely naked, and Keiichi disagrees with him so much on this point that he beats the absolute shit out of them, giving them a long-winded speech about how stark nakedness isn't arousing, and that a girl should at least have her socks on, because otherwise we're no better than animals. This is really, I can't believe this is actually a part of the story. This is such a funny and weird scene because Keiichi only draws the line when socks are mentioned to be taken off. He's literally so passionate about it in the manga that he goes Super Saiyan. Maybe bro is against foot fetishes? I don't know. Quentin Tarantino would probably disagree with Keiichi on this. I wonder if Keiichi would believe in the joke that it isn't gay as long as your socks don't come off. In the visual novel, he goes on to further lecture them about cosplay adult videos, because it's no longer cosplay if the person is naked, which is true. I just can't disagree with that. He does have a very factual point there. We learn that he really appreciates a Japanese school uniform too, which good to know, Keiichi. I won't judge you, I guess. I'm sure some people in the comments will agree with you. I learned far more about his preferences though, in the span of like 10 minutes than I think I ever truly wanted to, and that is also your burden to bear now. Do you think Keiichi was cooking, or do you disagree with him? Comments, let me know. Does taking off a cosplay, make the point of wearing cosplay completely pointless, and just taking off socks make us no better than animals when it comes to sex. These are questions that we should ask ourselves as the human species. The entire time he's lecturing them too, he's just smacking the shit out of them. They probably don't realize that being sexually shamed and beat up is better for them, because if Keiichi did step in, Shion was probably going to kill them because she turned her taser up to the highest wattage. Something that isn't mentioned in the manga or anime is that Shion's taser is actually modded. It can go to wattages far higher than a normal taser should, meaning that this will kill someone for sure, or at least, at the bare minimum, really hurt them. After a certain point, two kids named Tomita and Okamura return with help. You probably recognize them as these guys from the anime. When help arrives, the punks book it out of there. Keiichi goes in to check on Shion, but she really isn't too impressed because of how perverted he just revealed himself to be. Which, to be fair, I get it, girl. If you had somebody come to your rescue blaring about that shit, who would you be rooting for in that situation? To add to her lack of thrill, instead of getting patted on her head, it sounds like he gives her more of a nuggie than a head pat. In the visual novel, Mion goes on to explain to Shion who Keiichi is, and that she's into him, which, even though there really shouldn't be a competition, Shion tries to mentally measure him up to Satoshi, and whether she wants to try and toy with him, or to tease Mion about it. Going back to what I was saying about, at the very beginning, the arcs technically being different Kakera, I will say that the way that Keiichi and Shion meet could be different every time, given that in Watanagashi-hen it seems like they hadn't met until a certain point in the story. To further back this up, the bikers didn't recognize Keiichi and Watanagashi-hen, and Keiichi didn't recognize the bikers, which they should because of Keiichi defending Shion. This implies that the moment is exclusive to Meakashi. I talked with my friend Yandere Totodile about this, and he concluded that the arcs likely have events that are always the exact same, but little details that are different, like what games they may play, how Keiichi and Shion meet, and some others, which makes a lot of sense given that the two are considered different Kakera and given some events that happen exclusively in Meakashi. After this interaction, in either a day or two, we finally do enter completely Watanagashi-hen. From this point forward, I will be telling you both Keiichi's perspective and Shion's perspective. This is where the play-by-play that I've been telling you about will come into the picture. Although it's not in the anime or the visual novel, the manga gives us a perspective of Saturday, the day before they visit the toy story. And before you ask why they're going to school on Saturday, it's actually quite common in Japan for schools to be open on Saturday, although it's optional to attend. The Saturday attendance is typically for extra help in a subject if a student needs it, or to attend class activities or clubs. And, of course, the game club exists in Hinamizawa. Keiichi is rushing as quick as he can because he woke up late, and on his trek over, Mion rubs bro's butt and says it's as nice as ever. Yo, what the fuck, Mion? After a brief conversation, Mion challenges him to race before he can process what's going on, and she's going to win until she trips, unintentionally showing Keiichi what's going on downstairs. And this arc is super sexually charged, dude. What is going on? They're both very blushy about it, being a little sincere and whatnot, but Keiichi helps her up, holding her arm as they walk to class together. Onikakushi-hen had a lot of flirting and moments between Rena and Keiichi, but off the bat in Watanagashi-hen, it's clear that the romantic focus is between Mion and Keiichi this time around. Then, to reinforce the time loop aspect of things, when they arrive at school, Keiichi falls into the same trap as Sadako, set for him in Onikakushi-hen, and is comforted the same way by Rika. Although, to some, this may seem small or insignificant, I actually like it quite a bit, because it reinforces no matter how different each arc plays out, at their core, they're the same people we have come to know and love. Where this arc shows that it's stepping away from the typical events of Onikakushi-hen for the manga is that instead of Rena asking Keiichi to go with her around town, where he met Tomitake and visited the dump, they play cards at school instead. This means that Keiichi wouldn't find out about the series of mysterious deaths from Tomitake, and instead would find them out in a different circumstance than at the dump, which would lead him to not being paranoid about the people around him. The small little butterfly effect detail is really cool because it shows how one small detail leads to an entirely different set of events to occur. For their punishment game, unlike the last manga arc of there being a wide variety, like a school bathing suit, cat accessories, and a gym outfit, this time it simply is just a maid outfit. Naturally, Keiichi loses, so he has to wear it, along with apparently women's underwear too. On their way home, Rena points out how much happier Mion has been since he came to town, alluding to the fact that Rena is going to try and wingman Mion in this arc. One funny detail is that when Keiichi gets home, his dad is so inspired by seeing him in the maid outfit that he takes him to his workshop to paint. Mion calls him later to invite Keiichi out so he can enact his revenge on the club, and he happily accepts. And that's it for the manga original inclusion to the start of the arc. After this, it starts to sync up with the anime and visual novel. I did really like them taking their time to add this in. It highlights in various ways that this arc is going to be about Mion. It shows, like I said, that one small decision can lead to an entirely different timeline. And it shows that Keiichi's dad is a fucking freak. Sunday morning rolls around, Keiichi oversleeps, but he does manage to make it to their meeting spots so they can travel to Okinomiya. Here, they compete in a tournament at Mion's uncle's game store with a cash prize of 55,000 yen, which factored for inflation and converted to USD is nearly $600. In 1983, that's a fuck ton of money to be given away for anything, especially like a little kids tournament. The following scene that plays out is actually what happens in Go's 5th episode, where the gang all sit down at various tables to play various different types of games. Rena plays a card game, Keiichi's playing the game of life, Sadako is playing another type of card game, Rika is doing some toy fishing, and Mion already won her game before everybody even sat down, somehow. I'm not sure how she did that. On a different level, I suppose. This scene in the anime is replaced with a giant card game that everyone is participating in, but I have to say I much prefer them all playing different games. It showcases their personalities far better if you ask me, and plus it makes it funnier when Keiichi inevitably convinces the boys to let him win so they can dress up Sadako and Rika. Ironically enough, this is great foreshadowing for his ability to win people over and get out of situations that normally shouldn't be possible. He's fired up, and he's ready to take Mion on, but it turns out she has to go into work, so they schedule to settle things a different time. The group heads to the outside of the store where yet another iconic scene ends up starting, where the game store owner gives everyone a reward for helping make the event a big hit. Well, everyone except for Mion. Relatives don't get something. Did I mention Mion's related to this guy? Coincidentally, he is also named Yoshiro like the owner of Angel Mort. Two Yoshiros, both store owners in Okinomiya, for two green-haired twins. Seems like a funny coincidence. Keiichi's reward is a doll, and he doesn't want it because he's not feeling tough about his masculinity. Personally, if it was me, I'd fucking take that doll. I'd own that shit. But Keiichi doesn't feel that yet, because, you know, he's a teenager, so he might not be comfortable with something like that. The issue here, though, is that everyone else in the group seems very interested in the doll. Since he doesn't want it, and everyone else clearly does, he decides he should give it to someone. But he isn't sure who he should give it to. His natural reaction is that it should go to Mion, since she's the only one who didn't get a gift, which seems like very logical thinking, but on a whim decides to give it to Rena instead. In his mind, he didn't want to potentially off-put his current friendship with Mion by giving her the doll. Not a bad thought train, to be honest, because cute things are what Rena's all about, and I get not wanting to make a friendship potentially awkward, but while it's not as clear in the manga or the anime, the visual novel makes it very clear that Mion isn't exactly thrilled with this outcome. And I mean, who'd blame her? Rena is walking out of this exchange with two items, and one of them is from the guy Mion is crushing on. What makes this worse is that Keiichi says it doesn't suit Mion, and then agrees with her that she should have been born a guy. Oh, double uh-oh. As Mion heads off to work, the gang decides to disband and go home for the day. Sometime after this, Shion and Mion would have dinner together. Mion can't stop showing how excited she is about Keiichi, going on and on about all the cool things that they've done lately. Shion isn't listening though. She's got her mind on where her love is. What could Satoshi possibly be up to? She realizes that since the case is over, he could come back, but he hadn't yet. She really didn't want to wonder why that was the case, and it's a good thing she didn't because she's tuned back into the conversation as Mion's mood had drastically changed. No longer was she excitedly blabbering about Keiichi. Now she was grimly opening up about how she wished Keiichi had given her the doll. She was so painfully upset that Keiichi didn't view her as a girly girl and wanted to start everything over again. It's pretty easy to see why Mion is so upset from this. From a very young age, she was forced into a role of inheritance. She had to learn how the family operates, learn how to communicate to parts of the family in the village, fight in a war for God's sake for the town, and then create a club to help her friend that was being abused. Mion has always been doing everything she can for the people around her while taking on harsh leadership and prejudice. Through all of this, she thought of herself as still just a girl, but seeing as Keiichi views her as more of a man, it deeply upsets her. She wanted to hold on to that piece of her childhood and be girly, but she can't. They have a good heart-to-heart about how Mion can try to win over this situation with Keiichi. Their plan moving forward is to try and show Keiichi that Mion can be feminine, and then Shion jokingly says that she'll compete with Mion about it. Truthfully, inside, Shion was trying her best to be happy for Mion, but she couldn't help feeling envious. The boy that she loved was missing, and he may never come back again. The family didn't approve of her love with Satoshi and got in the way, but Mion and Keiichi, the family seemed to back it completely, and Mion likely wasn't worried about Keiichi disappearing at all. Mion made room in her head for someone else, and Shion felt that Satoshi could be slipping from hers too. After Mion left, Shion did an entire introspection on herself and how she felt she was drifting away from Satoshi. She searched locally, researched the curse, complied with the police, and did so much after he disappeared. She didn't like how everyone seemed to forget about him and move past his importance in places like the baseball team or the Hinamizawa school. It didn't help that Satoshi was a conversation topic that's basically forbidden, since talking about the curse and its victims is taboo. She missed him. She missed going shopping with him, being the baseball manager for him, teasing him and having her head pet. The visual novel is a black screen for her internal dialogue, but the manga paints a great picture of how greatly Shion is affected by all of this. She is still in love with someone who she is very unlikely to ever see again, and she knows that, but she can't accept it or move past it. To end this scene in the visual novel, we are shown a journal entry by Shion. I haven't mentioned the journal entries in this video yet because they haven't been super important, but this one definitely is. I haven't opened this notebook in a while. My feelings have been written down for over 150 pages. This notebook is the key to my heart. The other me, who's been sleeping since last year, is slowly waking up. This other me that Shion is referring to is either the person she was when Satoshi disappeared, or the demon within her that she shut away shortly after his disappearance. Or it could be both. Whichever it is, it's clear that Shion is aware that she's on a path to be unwell. This entire scene is downplayed so heavily in the anime, but it is absolutely the turning point for her mentally. If the demon she locked away is waking up, it thirsts for blood, and we know she's about to spill a lot of it. From here, we're going to be talking about Watanagashi-hen for a little bit. A few days later, the gang would meet for a club activity after school. To spare you the details of their 20-minute long game in the visual novel, Keiichi loses and is forced into a maid outfit. In the manga, he has to wear the combination of items for the previous arc. Once he's home, his mom mistakes the outfits he's been coming home in as him being a part of a drama club, a mistake that I personally find really funny, but she also lets him know that she won't be making dinner. She doesn't seem to be feeling well, so Keiichi's dad transports the two to a restaurant he claims is amazing. Angel Mort. Keiichi wasn't particularly impressed with the food at the establishment, but his dad assured him it wasn't for the food, it was for the service. In a surprisingly based maneuver, Keiichi punches his dad in the face for being a pervert, which is ironic given what he was talking about earlier. His dad tries to defend himself, that he's only there for artistic inspiration, to which Keiichi punches his dad again. Embarrassed and probably full of shame, his dad leaves for the bathroom, which, being alone, triggers Keiichi's creeper energy and he starts snooping on the outfits. While he's in the bathroom, Keiichi's dessert is delivered by none other than Mion. You can tell this is Mion because Shion would be much more casual, more flirty and teasing. Mion, on the other hand, when placed in situations like this, turns into a flustered, blushing mess. Remember, this is Watanagashi-hen. Shion doesn't meet Keiichi on the bikes like she did Meakashi-hen. Just in case you don't believe me, later in this arc, Shion confirms that she met Keiichi far down the line, and it's confirmed later in Minakuroshi again that this is Mion. And if you don't remember, Shion quit working at Angel Mort a year ago, so all lines point to this being Mion. Realizing the power imbalance they have since Keiichi is a customer, he uses the opportunity to say whatever he wants to. In the visual novel, it's kind of just teasing, but in the manga, bro is openly horny. Super horny. Omega Gooner behavior. Eventually, Mion tries to convince Keiichi that she's actually Shion. In the visual novel, she turns beet red because she doesn't think Keiichi is going to believe her. He decides to believe her though, as to not possibly taint his friendship with her. After a small end to their conversation, with some teasing at the end from both sides, Keiichi feels as if he has learned a new side to Mion that he didn't know existed. Just as Mion had wanted, she was able to start over and show Keiichi that she had the power to be girly. Keiichi's dad reappeared after creepily watching the two from afar, and he went home for the night. The next day, they spend, I kid you not, an hour of the visual novel making curry. I'm happy to see that Go adapted a part of the visual novel that the Deen anime didn't, but 55 minutes is absurd. The only thing you need to know about this is that Keiichi had his curry sabotaged by Sadako, so Keiichi made onigiri instead. Somehow, he manages to convince the entire group that onigiri is better anyways. Then the principal ate all the onigiri, so Keiichi went home hungry. This is the first foreshadowing for Keiichi's Silver Tongue, adjacent to Naruto's Talk no Jutsu. In the manga, the gang just eats all of Keiichi's lunch as a punishment for one of their games, which I gotta say, this might be more fucked up than messing up Bro's curry. That's the type of shit like school bullies do. On their way home, Keiichi accidentally outs Mion's job to Rena. The two cover the situation to the best of their ability, resulting in Keiichi complimenting and teasing Mion, turning her into a blushing mess just like earlier. They end up not doing a great job convincing Rena, so Mion just decides to leave the conversation, running away. Keiichi gets home, crashes on the floor starving, and then is greeted by Mion, who is pretending to be Shion. You can again tell by how flustered she is, and also by the fact that Shion would have no way of knowing so soon that Keiichi was hungry. Like, they literally just got home from school. The sneaky girl is using this opportunity to mask gas Shion and give Keiichi food. You may ask yourself, well, why is she doing this? Well, it's quite simple really. In Keiichi's eyes, as we've talked about, Mion is masculine. By disguising as Shion, she's gradually changing Keiichi's image of Mion, making him realize she is much more feminine than he thought. She's taking Shion's advice to heart in a very Sonozaki way. The food she gives Keiichi is a bento box, which of course is both a symbol and gesture of love and affection in Japanese culture. Keiichi doesn't realize this because he's dumb as bricks. Mion ends up leaving, and Keiichi digs in. The food is so good that he teases her about it the next day at school, but then gets embarrassed as fuck because he gave her candy in the bento box as a thank you. It's a really cute scene, to be honest. Mion and Keiichi shippers, this one scene may have sold me on the two of them. I get you guys now. I'm doing a lot of opinion changes on characters because of these two arcs. It's kind of insane how much the anime fucked up this ship. So much of the nuance between the two is lost because of how much they just decided to leave out or cut. One thing that's really funny is that before eating the food, Keiichi makes a small joke to himself in the visual novel about how if it were Mion, she'd put hot sauce or maybe a needle in the food. Both are references to Onikakushi, with the food having hot sauce in it but Keiichi mistaking it for a needle. This now makes that scene make a lot more sense, as since Mion was the one that gave him that food, this preconceived notion of masculinity in his mind would think Mion would play a prank on him like that. Of course, it was taken to a bit more of an extreme because he was hallucinating. Anyways, going back to Watanagashi, after that bit of teasing, the gang goes outside for recess. They talk about how Rika is the priestess for the Cotton Drifting Festival, something you all definitely already know about by now if you've been watching these videos in chronological order. They move into the classroom where Keiichi and Rena have a conversation about how looks can be deceiving, something that, much like the curry bit, was adapted into Go, but left out of the original. The reason this being cut from the Deen anime matters is that Rena comments about how Keiichi perceives Mion as a guy when she's a girl, but in reality, Rena thinks Mion is very feminine. Rena thinks Mion is very cute and doesn't want Keiichi to forget that. This probably means two things, and both are likely true. The first is that Rena sees Mion likes Keiichi and is wingmanning her, like we talked about earlier a little bit. Way to go, Rena! MVP! Love a girl helping another girl. The second is that Rena can tell Mion was upset she didn't get the doll the other day at the game store, and she's trying to let Keiichi know subtly he made the wrong decision. This one is probably true because later on we know Rena and Mion talked about it, but it also could be true since Rena seems to have a very keen eye for how people are feeling, so she'd probably be able to decipher how Mion is feeling about that situation. Another reason this conversation is important is because Keiichi questions that if everyone isn't necessarily how they seem, that means that the cutesy front of Rena was hiding something very sinister. The cicadas in the background of the scene of the visual novel definitely indicates that this part of the scene is meant to be foreshadowing to Rena's murderous tendencies in later arcs. Because of their conversation, Keiichi thinks to himself that he'd really like to get to see the feminine side of Mion more. Conveniently, Mion sets Keiichi up to do that perfectly. Turns out Keiichi lost his key at Angel Mort the other day, so she invites him to Angel Mort later that day to both retrieve it and see Shion, which means she wants Keiichi to come and visit her. So, he gets home, grabs his bike, and heads to Okonomiya. In the manga and anime, instead of returning the bento box at school, returning it to Mion is the reason for going to Okonomiya. Once in the city, he finds himself so excited and thrilled to see this side of Mion again that he accidentally kicks over that set of bikes, the same one that belongs to the thugs. Honestly, if I was them, I'd be pissed too by the amount of times these fucking things get knocked over. They come over to confront Keiichi, scaring the shit out of him until Mion comes over to rescue him. The way she acts is very reminiscent of how she acted at the Sonozaki family meetings, kinda like how she did with Shion when she was brought in for her restitution. The rest of Okonomiya doesn't know Shion exists because of Orio's rules about not going into the public, or at least a large portion of them don't know, so the moment they see who they believe to be Mion, and it is Mion, fighting a battle against these thugs, they begin to crowd around and support. The manga and honestly the anime too do a good job on showing how intimidating this is. We, of course, see the full force of how scary this unification can be in Himatsubushi-hen. The reason they gather, as Mion explains to Keiichi when they all go to Angel Mort, is because the village is united. The enemy of one is the enemy of all. This is of course the village mindset that comes during and post the damn war, which is why they treat the Hojos poorly and is foreshadowed to the eventual unification to save Sadako later on in the series. Also, just in case you needed convincing that this was Mion, in this scene when referring to her grandmother, Mion calls her Bacha, which Shion almost exclusively refers to her as Onibaba. Shion also is outspoken a few times about how she thinks the village solidarity is dumb. It is the reason she believes Satoshi was treated so poorly, after all. Once their conversation about the village patriotism wraps up, Mion asks that if Shion and Mion were both hanging from cliffs, who would he choose to save? Keiichi doesn't realize the intention behind this question, but I believe it's so Mion can see whether Keiichi prefers her acting girly, sweet, and making stuff for him, or prefers her acting masculine, competitive, and raunchy, but he can't seem to give an answer, which makes Mion embarrassed for asking. Before Keiichi leaves, again, just in case you weren't convinced this is Mion, Keiichi literally calls her Mion and she doesn't correct him, proving that this is in fact not Shion. Keiichi even subconsciously realizes his mistake. Once home, Keiichi receives a call later that night from the actual Shion inviting him to the desert festa at Angel Mort and then a date afterwards. Her joke earlier about maybe trying to compete with Mion for Keiichi is coming to fruition, even if Keiichi right now still believes Mion and Shion are the same person. So, without realizing it, Keiichi assigned himself to meet the real Shion on the following day. In the anime, this all plays out pretty differently. From the get-go with the bikers, this is actually Shion. She confirms to Keiichi that she wasn't the one who brought him the bento box, and teases him that it feels like they're on a date. And then they bump into Mion. We don't get a deeper explanation for the village unity with the damn war. We don't get Mion gauging Keiichi's preferences, and we don't get Shion intentionally meddling with the two's blossoming relationship while also trying to understand why Mion likes Keiichi, when in her eyes, Satoshi is better in every way. I know I make comments like this in a lot of these timeline videos. I've already done it a few times this one, but I didn't realize just how much they cut from the source material until I actually consume it. It's insane that they thought they could fit 15 hours of content in almost 2 hours worth of episodes. Like, you're literally adapting 1/10 of the story. The next day at school, Keiichi is super excited, but it's very clear Mion has no clue Keiichi is going to the dessert festa. He doesn't pick up on this at all, being the dumbest bricks man that he is. Later, Keiichi is walking home with Rena. This conversation in the visual novel is meant to be lighthearted, with her cluing in Keiichi that he hurt Mion with the doll subtly, saying someone hurt Mion, and then she goes into her excited blushing mode. While it isn't said why, it's clear that Mion told Rena that she has feelings for Keiichi, and because of that, Rena can't contain how happy she is about it. She seems to love. We've seen her act like this in other situations. The manga frames this pretty ominously, when in reality it's not that way. It's just a friend telling another friend indirectly that they may have fucked up. She ends up getting so excited that she makes herself nauseous, and after helping her home, Keiichi books it to Angel Mart for his date. When Keiichi sits down and is greeted by the real Shion, he does pretty quickly pick up that her tone and demeanor are different than normal, and she's much more flirty and bold compared to normal. The rest of the building is full of neckbeards that are frothing at the mouth for the waitresses. One of them apparently paid $700 to be there from scalper prices for the tickets. I'm sure if this took place in the modern day, he'd be invested in Pokemon cards or Labubus. This is coming from somebody that plays the Pokemon TCG. It's rough out here, gang. Even though Keiichi is a pervert, at least he has standards. While waiting, Shion trips and spills dessert on one of the neckbeard's jeans, right where his nards are. Based on his reaction, it's clear he tripped her so that she'd spill it right there. Knowing that this is Shion, who has had a lot of shitty things happen to her and is in love with a man that disappeared, now being forced to clean a Discord mod's balls, makes it all like 1,000 times worse. The Gooner gang in the room all start chanting for her to wipe it for him too, which, like, come on, what a load of creeps. Remembering how he was saved by one of the twins during the bike situation, he elects to save Shion, although his saving doesn't go too well. Immediately after challenging the creep to a fist fight, he gets his ass whooped. He wakes up a little later and notices that Shion's towel has wiped cream on it. She cleaned the dude anyways. He had failed at his mission, but he wasn't done yet. He decides to exact his revenge. He calls up the motherfucking game club, bro. The gang rolls in, eat some pretty tasty looking desserts, and are informed about what's going on. They all agree to join forces to protect Shion at any costs, and the manga does a great job highlighting their antics. The Gooner Squad decides to try and trip Shion again. Rena acts like she's in the fucking Matrix, catching everything that's falling in seconds, while also managing to attack all the freaks in one go. Do not fuck with Rena, bro. You will not survive. Also, the way Rena reacts to the Angel Mort uniforms in the manga makes me think she might be bisexual, but, you know, I digress. There's not enough here for that. Sadako then enacts her part of the plan, which is to mix shit in with everyone's desserts. It isn't said explicitly what she put in them, but it's gotta be some form of laxative, because they start stampeding their way to the bathrooms. To their assholes' dismay, Sadako had completely clogged every single one of the toilets. Which, holy fuck, that's crazy. They end up rushing into the women's restroom where it's Rika's part of the plan. She's in there, and she cries when they come in there, because a bunch of men rushed into the women's bathroom. They freak out, both feeling bad and really having to shit. So when Rika offers to take them to a bathroom outside, they unanimously agree super fast. But here's the catch, and Keiichi's part of the plan. The moment they leave Angel Mort, they cannot come back in. But they have to shit so bad that their horny urges cannot keep them in the restaurant, leading them to abandon ship. When they all work together, their plan was a massive success. You may wonder to yourself, Hunter, why did you explain in so much detail about the game club fighting off some gooners? Well, not only was it pretty satisfying, do justice if you ask me, fuck those guys, but it also is, and you've already heard me say it a lot in this video, foreshadowing. In later arcs, the only way they're able to save everyone and stop the cycle is by working together, using every piece they bring to the table. The first time we see it on full display is in this little Angel Mort battle. I get why the anime would cut the scene out, but it is a pretty great way to flesh out the group's friendship and dynamic even further. Plus, it's really funny how in the manga, Rika leads these guys way far into the woods, and then in the visual novel they all get arrested in a different county. Sadako and Rika would go home, leaving Rena and Keiichi to stay together at Angel Mort. Rena comments about how Shion and Mion look identical, but Keiichi points out how he thinks it's reversed, with Shion being much more girly. Rena responds fairly coldly to this. Keiichi may not have been able to pick up earlier in the day who hurt Mion, but here he realizes that it must have been him who hurt her. Keiichi asks her to tell her what's wrong, apologizing that if he did anything wrong, he wants to make amends for it. She clarifies that she isn't mad at him, and that in reality he didn't do anything intentionally wrong, that she feels like Mion might potentially be the one who's being unfair here. Rena then tells him that it's up to him to figure it out, but she does give him one hint. If Mion let her hair down, would she be impossible to tell apart from Shion? Or that maybe Mion was pretending to be Shion this whole time. How would he react? Keiichi doesn't understand what she means, but it's clear she's trying to get him to really think that in reality, Mion acts like a girl because she is a girl. Keiichi is left to his own devices as Rena gets up to leave. She says that as a fellow girl, she hopes he figures it out on his own and apologizes. Shion wraps up her job for the day, so Keiichi takes this opportunity in the town to try and pick her brain apart and see what he did wrong. What I'm sure he didn't expect was her to be sheer honest with him, saying Mion has taken a massive liking to him and talks about him often. After a little bit of walking, she links arms with Keiichi's. I don't think the Shion and Meakashi would say this, but the one in Watanagashi-hen says she can understand why Mion took a liking to him. She also mentions how there are some parts to Mion that she doesn't like, and how there are a few things that she can't forgive her for, which I'm pretty sure we may have a good idea what those are from previous parts of the video. Shion takes me to the storefront of the game store they had their tournament at earlier, pointing out that all girls like dolls and toys, Mion included. He realizes that the doll she's referring to is the one that he got, and after she questions what he did with it, he finally realizes that he fucked up when he gave Rena the doll instead of Mion. In the visual novel and the manga, we get to hear the phone call that took place between Rena and Mion, and it's fairly similar to her conversation with Shion from Meakashi, where she tells Rena she wishes they could start over from a different perspective that isn't her own, and that she's going to try and work her way to get Keiichi to buy her a new doll. So Shion tries to help Keiichi realize he needs to buy the doll. She's trying to homie her sister. Keiichi, still thinking that there is zero difference between Mion and Shion, agrees to buy her the doll and ruffles her hair. They have a moment here. Although unfortunately without Shion's perspective, like in Meakashi, it's hard to tell exactly how this affects her. Keiichi thinks she's trying to hold back laughter and tears, which both are probably true. Keiichi thinks he's rizzing up Mion, but in reality, it's Shion, so she probably thinks it's funny, especially since she's winning the competition she suggested to Mion, who could get Keiichi the fastest. But the tears are likely her guilt she feels for Satoshi. She does seem to be very impressed by how he acted today at Angel Mart, which is the opposite reaction she had when Keiichi came to save her from the bikers in Meakashi. However, the head pat here and this moment she's having with him are still her kind of betraying how she feels for Satoshi, so it's likely to make her upset. Impulsively, Keiichi goes into the store to buy the doll at that very moment, and shockingly, Shion goes along with him, grabbing his arm and asking if it's okay if she starts to like him a bit too. From what we know about the two in this arc, it's clear that they have similar taste in men. Shion developing feelings for Keiichi is honestly inevitable. My interpretation for her asking verbally if it's okay if she falls for Keiichi is both because it would hurt Mion, and also asking for permission from someone if it's okay that she tries to move past Satoshi some. They go into the store together and wham, immediate disaster. Keiichi is suddenly met with two green-haired girls. This is when he gets the rude awakening that Shion and Mion are, in fact, two different people. The thing that really sucks about this moment is that Shion inadvertently undoes a lot of progress everyone has been edging along for Keiichi to realize Mion is a lot more than he realizes. Seeing the two separately, he may potentially go back to the thought train and start to think the same way he was about Mion again, since all of those times that she was girly actually could have just been a different person. Here, Shion properly introduces herself and admits to having invited Keiichi to the dessert festa so she could meet him after how much Mion praised him. It's also here that Shion outs Mion as the one who delivered the bento, and the manga makes it clear that Mion was the one who saved him from the bikers, just as we had cleared up earlier in the video. It's rough. It's clear that Shion's intentions here were originally to help Keiichi realize what he needed to do, helping progress her sister's potential relationship, but then she let her own feelings get in the way. And behind closed doors, this probably backfires in immense guilt for Shion betraying Satoshi's feelings, or at least that's what she may think. In the visual novel, Mion is clearly about to break out in tears at any moment. It's posed as lighthearted and fun in the anime, manga, and visual novel, silly music playing behind it, but it's fucked. It's kind of messed up on many levels for all characters involved. The next day, Mion could basically not interact with Keiichi. Completely understandable, I mean, given everything that happened the night before. Rena manages to mend the situation. She seems to be pretty good at that, considering she did the same for Shion and Satoshi earlier in this video. And the solution for both Mion and Keiichi is to forget the last few days ever happened. As long as Keiichi walked out realizing there were cute aspects to Mion, that is. He doesn't exactly agree to this, but he does agree to learning to be more delicate with his words, so something like this doesn't happen again. Nothing much happened that day afterwards to try and help mend the situation further, and in later days it seems to have worked as things calmly went back to normal. In the following days, Keiichi volunteers to help set up the festival. He finds himself wanting to do something to help the village, and what would be more perfect for helping the village than their most treasured cotton drifting festival. The entire committee seems to be super thrilled he's there to help, especially Mion. He worked hard for a few hours and then was rewarded with some tea. From Shion? Hey, wait, what are you doing here? Mion comes over very soon after with the 2 cups of tea, obviously trying to give Keiichi some. Oh, come on, we're actively meddling with Mion now? In her own fucking city? Might as well take a photo of the occasion. At least that's what Tomitake was probably thinking as he and Takano rolled up to see what's happening. Takano and Shion, of course, have some history with each other, given that Takano helps Shion learn more about the supposed curse and her inklings that the Sonozaki family is involved to some degree. They begin to start talking about the curse, Keiichi curious as to what they could be talking about. Mion tries to bring Keiichi away from this conversation because she clearly isn't a fan of the whole curse idea, especially since it tends to paint her family in a specific bad image. From the way Shion acts in this brief conversation, she does still seem to believe the Sonozakis are behind the curse to some capacity, and she wants Keiichi to know about it. Probably so he is more prepared than Satoshi was. In the manga, Shion is obviously remembering Satoshi when she says she wondered who will die and who will disappear. You've all already had the details of the curse in the series of mysterious deaths explained to you 1,000 times by now, so I'll spare you the details of their conversation. The thing that's probably the most important is that Shion made it clear through her tone to Keiichi that she knew Satoshi very well, and Keiichi can also tell she doesn't seem to like Hinamizawa much. The conclusion the group thrust upon Keiichi, and one that I'm sure many of you could have guessed given Shion's thought process in Meakashi, is that someone is using the curse to kill. In Meakashi, and I'm pretty positive this next bit only takes place in Meakashi, sometime during that day, Shion and Mion would play tug-of-war with Keiichi in the middle. We can tell it's the same day because they're on the Furude Shrine grounds, and the only time that they go here before the festival during this arc is the day before. Shion lets go, sending Keiichi flying into Mion. When she bids them farewell, Keiichi thanks her for something she did that day, and then rubs her head. Unlike the previous times, this one sent her into a blushed mess because this hand did remind her of Satoshi's. She ended up fleeing the scene immediately in a panic, feeling incredibly guilty for having, just for a moment, betrayed her feelings to Satoshi. She tries to convince herself that she's unhappy without Satoshi. She tries really hard, but she just can't deny that she was happy for a moment with Keiichi just now. In her head, similar to the conversation she had with the demon, she imagines a conversation with Satoshi that never happened. He apologizes to her, but she stops him. She's the one who should apologize. She said she would wait for him forever, that nothing would shake her feelings. But before she could even realize it, her heart was wide open. The Satoshi inside of her keeps disappearing, and he offers that he can disappear forever if it'll lead to her having less troubles. But if he can give her strength, he'll stay with her. She begs and pleads for him to stay with her. And although he says he will, he vanishes. This moment, although brief in the visual novel and manga, is powerful. I can't speak from experience here because it's never happened to me, but this must be what people feel when they lose a partner. Moving on, finding new love. It must be nice, but it must hurt. You cherish the moments you make with the new person, but within you, you feel the pain of never being able to have those moments with the person you lost ever again. I can't even imagine what that's like. The pain she must be going through. Her train of thought bursts when a car drives by, and she wonders if Satoshi is still with her. She begins to walk back to her moped, because yes, she has one in the visual novel, and as she walks, she hears an extra footstep. Stopping and honing in on it, she can immediately feel that there is someone else with her. She can't see them though, but she knows someone is there. We, of course, know that this someone is absolutely Hanyuu. Since it's the day before the Cotton Drifting Festival, she has likely begun her search around to see what the cause of Rika's death could be this time. And because of how similar the Kakera is to Watanagashi, they must suspect Shion of being the cause again. However, because of Hanyuu's presence, she mistakes this for Satoshi. In an act of unfortunate timing, Shion now believes that Satoshi is in fact, always there with her, and latches on to this idea heavily. She spends the night telling him how much she loves him and has waited for him. And while it is extremely sweet, it isn't him. The next day, Kasai asks Shion if she's planning to go to the festival, and she sure is. She wants to look around with Satoshi and to feel him enjoying her being with everybody. Back in Watanagashi, our game club gang are just rolling up to the festival. Just like earlier with the curry bit at school, Keiichi talks up some yakisoba so hard that an entire crowd forms around him to eat at that stand. And after the rest of the game almost put a takoyaki vendor out of business on accident, he gave a speech that formed a giant line again and made the vendor cry from how understood he felt. In the anime, I'll admit, this aspect of him being able to rally people and speak to their hearts came out of nowhere. And I think in previous videos, I've said Keiichi feels kind of like an edgy asshole in the anime. But in the visual novel, it all makes complete sense. He's extremely charismatic. No wonder he can convince people so easily for stuff. At this festival, he basically has a giant crowd that follows him around to every stand he approves of. Trying to match Keiichi's flow, Mion does her best to hype up a goldfish catching stand, but instead she says that they look delicious and that she could eat one of them raw. What? Clearly misunderstanding the assignment, she immediately starts to freak out, as does everybody else. Shion speaks up to mock Mion, even though she'd apparently been watching her for a very little while now. Mion tells her to get lost, so she clasps to Keiichi's arm, making sure a certain part of her was catching his arms, if you catch my drift. The shocking part of this all to me is that in the visual novel, Rika joins in to do the same thing, which is like, you know, isn't she probably at least a few hundred years old by now? The implications of this are a little strange. So, let's not look into it too deeply. Feeling as if she has successfully teased Mion enough, Shion runs away into the crowd. Back to Meakashi, after running away from the gang, she runs into Takano and Tomitake. They have a brief conversation where Takano mentions that she had wished to bump into Shion again, seeking her out at the library sometimes when she visited. She had missed having a fellow researcher, as she claims. Their conversation is cut short because drums could be heard, meaning the ceremonial dance is about to begin. Shion asks if they're going to watch Rika's dance, and to her surprise, finds out the two of them are planning to sneak into the ritual storehouse, so she could prove her hypothesis about the storehouse being full of ancient, ritualistic killing tools and devices. Shion isn't sure about going to the place, because if it is full of these ritualistic devices, that means Satoshi is likely in fact dead, at least to her, and she doesn't want that to be true. But on the flip side, if those aren't in there, she can continue to believe Satoshi might still be out there somewhere. After hearing the drums, Rika goes to take her place to perform the ceremonial dance, while the gang pulls up to see Rika in action. Satoko, Mion, and Rena all beat Keiichi over to the location, so he is stuck at the back of the crowd, unable to see anything. Jumping doesn't even do him any good either. On the flip side, again, Shion decides she will go and investigate the storehouse, but she doesn't want to do it alone. She is admittedly a little afraid. So, she goes to bring Keiichi with her. In a very fucked up thought train, Shion figures that since her love disappeared last year, that Mion's should disappear this year. When she arrives, Keiichi assumes it's because he's trying his best to see Rika's dance, and that she must know a better place to see it. He has no clue she's going to take him somewhere completely different. He follows her up the hill, confused to where they're going until Shion points out Tomitake and Takano in front of them. Worried that they're interrupting something that they shouldn't be, Keiichi starts to make a commotion and gets their attention. This is when Keiichi gets the feel about what the warehouse is, its historical significance, and that Takano and Tomitake are planning to break in. Keiichi, being quite reasonable here, says that they absolutely should not go into the warehouse. But, of course, we all know he decides to go in anyways. Shion, Takano, and Keiichi go inside while Tomitake stands guard outside. Once inside, Keiichi is greeted with the familiar statue of Oyashiro-sama, which Shion is angry to see. Takano explains the myth of what these tools were likely originally used for, the entrail drifting festival. But, as it's a story Shion has already heard before, she decides to investigate around. She notices what she thinks is Satoshi's presence feeling sad for some reason, and decides to follow it around. Shion realizes that most of the tools are similar, if not the same ones, that are under the Sonozaki estate. The place seems to be kept up and taken care of too, as there are fresh flowers in the building. She believes that some person is trying to make Oyashiro-sama's legacy real, and that whoever this was behind the deaths. To quote, "The human who demoned away Satoshi isn't that far away." What's really ironic is right after this, she hears footsteps, and the footsteps are right by Takano. In the manga, it's even more clear that this thought Shion has is immediately followed up by Takano being the focal point of the panel, foreshadowing her involvement in what's really going on in the village. The stomping freaks out Shion really, really bad. She quickly realizes that whatever is watching her isn't Satoshi. For some reason, everyone else can't hear it, but it's so loud, Shion can barely focus on what Takano is talking about. The manga does a great job illustrating both how loud this is and how much it's making Shion tweak the fuck out. The reason for this stomping sound is, of course, none other than Hanyuu. We see later on in Minagoroshi-hen that when Takano exaggerates bits of the story or got parts of the Onikakushi legend wrong, Hanyuu would start throwing a tantrum and angrily stomping. The stomping only starts when Takano starts to tell Keiichi a story about the town's history, and since Hanyuu is tasked with helping Rika figure out what's going on, this means she is probably in the storehouse at this very moment to see what's happening, and got pissed off because Takano was misexplaining her history. In the visual novel, Shion also notices that the sounds seem to be out of frustration, and it sounds like a child hopping on wood, but in turn, it ends up terrifying Shion. The reason Shion is the only one who is aware and can hear Hanyuu's footsteps is that due to everything that's happened to her and last year, plus this situation likely being high stress, Shion is somewhere in level 4 of the syndrome already. Keiichi and Takano should be level 1 and 2. Shion's panic and Takano's story time all come to a halt as Tomitake opens the door, mentioning having heard a lot of noise and was worried, so he wanted to see if everyone was okay. This is something I didn't know, but it turns out that Takano has given Tomitake fake Himinamizawa syndrome immunities. She confirmed in Minagoroshi-hen that Tomitake is always at level 3 of the syndrome because of this, meaning that in this scene, Tomitake actually did hear Hanyuu too. Seeing as things are okay though, he lets everyone know that the ceremonial dance is finished and that they're heading to the river to drift cotton, although it looks like they missed most of the festivities as everyone by the river is wrapping things up. Tomitake and Takano leave to go supposedly do some couple stuff, which we know isn't true, and Shion bids Keiichi farewell so he could go see his friends, but before she leaves, she makes sure to tell Keiichi not to tell anyone because she is worried they're prime suspects for this year's curse. In Watanagashi, the stomping, or at least Shion's response to it, seems to have been a lot smaller than it was in Miakashi, since she calmly asks Keiichi afterwards if the stomping bothered him, something she doesn't do in Miakashi. In Miakashi, she assumes that Keiichi can't hear it because it's so loud. If he did, he would almost certainly have reacted to it. She mentions that it sounded far away, so she couldn't hear it as well in Watanagashi. The reason for this is probably, again, because Shion mistook Hanyuu for Satoshi a little earlier, which Hanyuu was only likely there, since again, Miakashi seems to be similar kakera to Watanagashi. Regardless of how different her response is, in both arcs, Shion leaves Keiichi and he regroups with the gang. As he does, Mion asks Keiichi if he saw Shion. He immediately thinks it's because they went to the shrine, but the real reason she's asking is because she's probably worried Shion has been secretly putting some moves on him. This furthers his paranoia as everyone goes to drift some cotton before the festival comes to a close. Later that night, Shion would go to a party at the Sonozaki estate and get a little wasted. So she asks to stay the night, knowing that if she gets found, she'd be in trouble. She crocs out pretty quickly in Mion's room, but wakes up later and realizes Mion never came to bed. After what happened earlier that night, Shion was understandably very afraid of being alone. One thing for you to keep in mind moving forward is that Shion is always acting at level 4 of the syndrome, and because of her being tense right now, those senses are probably much higher. Shion finds where Mion and Oreo are conversing, and immediately finds out that Takano and Tomitake are missing. She falls to her knees. The curse has happened a 5th year in a row. She begins to panic, assuming that they know the 4 of them snuck into the storehouse. In her mind, she starts thinking about her conversation with Rena from earlier in that arc, and instead of it being to Satoshi, she starts to convince herself that Rena was predicting what would happen to her. The phone started to ring next to her, and because of how freaked out she was, she had no reaction until Mion came out, grabbed Shion by the collar, and took her over to the phone. When Mion answers, she asks whoever is on the line to please make sure nobody talks about this. Shion freaks out about what this could mean, and it's probably Mion trying to keep word from getting out to the village. She doesn't want people to freak out that the curse has happened again. What happens next is heavily hallucinated by Shion due to how much stress and paranoia she's under, and it isn't properly conveyed in the anime. In the manga and visual novel, it's made more clear by her expressions, mostly her eyes, as per normal for a person experiencing hallucinations in this series. She explains to Shion that it seems the curse fell upon Tomitake and Takano, how they died, and it's really unfortunate and terrible. Mion believes the only reason they could have died is because they made Oyashira mad. Their entire conversation, Mion is trying to make Shion be quieter. Mion appears stern and cold throughout their whole conversation, but as I mentioned, I believe Shion is hallucinating. The reality of Mion's behavior is probably more somber since 2 people she knew died again in horrific ways, and even though before they could have been written off as coincidences, now she is truly starting to believe there might really be a curse. No matter how much she has tried to make this year's festival be a hit, the curse has happened again and it's likely to once again be connected or blamed with her family. The reason her tone is lower is so they don't alert Oreo that Shion is at the residence. While Mion was mourning and getting ready to have to deal with a new shitstorm, Shion in her mind was connecting non-existent dots that the Sonozakis must have been behind the curse, and that they, in turn, were the ones that made Satoshi disappear. Convinced to avenge Satoshi, she teases Mion so hard she falls unconscious. Oreo in the other room can be heard asking Mion who she was talking to, since, again, she has no clue Shion is staying over. Shion tases her, but because of her age, she dies immediately from the shock. While they were unconscious, Shion acted quickly, bringing them to the estate basement. There, she trapped Mion in one of the cells and put Oreo in the torture room. When Mion woke up a little later, the two had a small chat. Shion asks what the point of the series of mysterious deaths is. Was it to signify the end of the Dam War? Mion replies that she thinks that's the reason, but truthfully, Mion doesn't know. Although it seems she suspects that Oreo is barking commands for these deaths without her knowing about it, and that there is an underside that deals with it. Ironically, Shion mentioned how Tomitake's death was more unnatural, questioning if they had used a shot of some kind, which is exactly what happened. But she asks if they were chosen for this year's curse because they went in the storehouse. Mion is shocked to hear this, which clearly goes to show that no one had even known they had gone in the ritual storehouse. Mion mumbles that, of course, something happened to them if they went in there, and later goes on to say that the ritual storehouse has some significant meaning to the elderly people of the village. So, Mion is, again, assuming that Oreo was somehow involved in their deaths, and this gives a decent reason for how or why she wanted them to die. Shion questions why this year there were 2 bodies found, and Mion guesses that means there must have been 4 people involved. Shion goes to question Oreo, hypothesizing that whoever the underside person that she ordered around likely was involved with the clinic because of how Tomitake died, only really being explainable through some type of drug. With Ire being the only person that came to her mind, she dismissed this quickly, although she seems to have forgotten about a certain blonde nurse that works there. Next in her mind, she suspects Kimiyoshi or Rika, but she doesn't think Rika could do it, so she suspects Kimiyoshi is the secret string puller. Once in front of Oreo, she begins to torture and threaten her, until she realizes that Oreo's already dead. In a fit of anger, realizing she won't get any crucial answers from the person she believes to be behind everything, and that she could never get Oreo to atone for what she had done to the Hojo family, she grabs a whip and starts smacking the shit out of her corpse. While she was whipping, she noticed someone watching her that she can't see. Hanyuu again. Hanyuu is likely here to for sure find out what's going on, and to alert Rika of the situation. Her being there makes Shion question her sanity and if there really is a curse, but she dismisses it. Then, she remembers there's a well with an apparent secret passage in it. In front of the well, and near Mion's cell, she lets it be known to Mion and their now dead grandmother that she's pissed they lied to her, hitting us with another one of the series' iconic Usada moments. And a sad freakout about how badly Shion wants Satoshi back. She made restitution, and yet Satoshi disappeared anyway. This moment doesn't hit super hard in the visual novel, but it's pretty powerful in the anime, and as per usual, the manga hits it out of the park, showcasing just about every emotion that Shion goes through in such a short amount of time. Ignoring the potential secret passage, she uses the well as a place to dump Oreo's dead body. After this, she managed to fall back asleep in Mion's bedroom. She awakes again later to a phone call. Kimiyoshi is on the line. In response to what's happened, there will be an emergency meeting at the assembly hall. Makes sense, a big thing has happened in the town. Once she hangs up, it rings again. This time, it's Kasai. He is also aware of what's happened, and when Shion mentions it's probably because they snuck into the storehouse, Kasai responds similarly to Mion, that it was stupid of them to do that. Then she admits that she also went into the storehouse. Kasai, extremely disappointed, asks her how she could do something like that with what happened the year before, and how she plans to make restitution this time. She makes a lot of excuses for why she did something she knew she shouldn't, and when Kasai expresses there are some things he can't protect her from, she panics and hangs up the phone, not wanting to hear Kasai express his disappointment anymore. While washing her face off after the phone call, she realizes that the only restitution she can probably make at this point is with her own life, since she's caused so much chaos already and killed Oreo. In her eyes, she was essentially already dead, which meant that she had nothing to lose. Which, you know what they say, it's the people with nothing to lose that are the most dangerous, and I think that is no exception here. She was going to do everything she could to expose the truth and to avenge Satoshi, and she would go down fighting. Shion puts on Mion's outfit and heads to school, fully prepared to pretend to be Mion so that she can try and stop Keiichi from disappearing. On the flip side, Keiichi barely slept because going into the storehouse the night before freaked him out so badly. He meets up with Rena, and then the gang waits for Mion. Little do they know, it's actually Shion. Well, they do pretty quickly actually pick up that Mion is acting differently than normal. Just so it won't get confusing, I'll refer to her as Shion instead of Mion so we remember who she really is, even if she's pretending to be Mion right now and all the characters think that she's Mion. In class, Keiichi and Shion are completely out of it. Shion is thinking about how whoever is enacting the curse will go for Keiichi next, so she tries to devise her ways to keep her eyes on him 24/7, if possible, while Keiichi is still feeling the lack of sleep. He's feeling it so much that he ends up falling asleep, getting smacked by chalk to wake up, and then told to go outside to try and wake himself up with some water splashes. Once outside to wash up, Shion came outside to do the same and chat with him briefly. Keiichi goes to walk inside when he stopped one last time, and she asks if he saw Tomitake and Takano the night before. He gives a bad excuse, one that Shion can see through immediately, but it at least assures her that he's trying to lie. Then, not knowing that Mion had already asked this, she asks if he had seen Shion, to which he points out that she had already asked. Surprised, Shion assumes Mion asked because she had lied to her and knew they had snuck into the ritual storehouse. Again, the reason Mion likely asked Keiichi is to see if Shion was taking claim on another boy the two of them had liked. In the anime, Shion is very calm or teasing during this exchange, making it pretty impossible to tell anything is up and that she actually might just be hungover. It's a very different story in the manga and visual novel, as she lets the anger that potentially Mion lied to her contort her face into an expression of pure malice, one that certainly freaks the fuck out of Keiichi in both arcs. In the anime, after asking this, Shion simply says she'll just relay Keiichi wasn't involved in anything. But in both arcs, in the visual novel and manga, she doesn't give Keiichi as much room to wonder what she means. She tells him straight up that people in the village are talking poorly about Shion, Tomitake, and Takano, and now Keiichi. But because of how Keiichi is answered, she'll tell them not to worry. Shion says this to probably comfort Keiichi. Probably. This doesn't comfort him at all though. Now he's super panicked, and she stops back to the Sonozaki estate with a big grin. There, she plans to meet up with Keiichi as Shion in Okinomiya, since Keiichi needs to return some books to the library for his parents. Once they arrive in Okinomiya, they drop off their books and chat in the library. Through their chat, Keiichi gets to learn just how powerful the Sonozakis are from Shion, and as she's about to tell Keiichi that they could be in danger, Oishi pops in to their talk. Oh, this hot, sexy beast. Subtly, he keys Shion that he wants to talk to Keiichi alone, and worried that he'll spill some beans about her past and Satoshi, she leaves. Here, Oishi hammers in on what Shion was hinting at, telling Keiichi essentially that the Sonozakis could be pretty bad people. And then he gets asked essentially the same exact questions he got by Shion, and does probably an even worse job lying to Oishi than he did to Shion earlier. Just like in Shion's case, where she did already know the answer to the questions she was asking, Oishi did too. He just wanted to see if Keiichi would lie or not. Panicked, Keiichi went home. Shion made her way to the Furude shrine to attend the emergency meeting for the village. In the visual novel, immediately a lot of stress is put on her and she is supposed to be the one who leads the meeting. Naturally, she has no experience doing something of the sort, so in desperation, she hopes Kimiyoshi will do it. And, thankfully, he does agree to. Once inside, he tells the group about Tomitake and Takano. In the visual novel, she spaces out and loses track of what's going on, coming back to with Kimiyoshi looking at her. He asks Shion if Oreo had said anything about the event, and here she pretends to be Mion and delivers the news that the curse has struck again, and that it was because of them stepping into the ritual storehouse. The entire crowd rips up into an uproar, and it's hard to say whether this moment happened for real or not. Some parts do seem exaggerated compared to what we know about the village elders, especially Kimiyoshi, so it is possible she's hallucinating given the stress she's under attending this meeting. However, the elders could totally be this angry about religious sacrilege without hallucinations. Regardless, once they have calmed down, Shion let them know that there are currently 2 survivors, Shion and Keiichi. As she explained this, she became hyper-aware of people in the rooms breathing and everyone appearing to have deadpan expressions, again likely pointing to hallucinations. She ends the meeting by saying they'll all be demoned away. After the meeting, she invites Kimiyoshi to the estate where she confides in him, pretending to be Mion but asking questions about Shion's safety. Kimiyoshi assures Shion that there's no reason for her to be demoned away, and then he will personally ask Oreo to forgive Shion. She asks if he can for sure guarantee that, given what happened to Satoshi the year before. And although this is meant to assure her, he says, quote, he was a brat of the Hojo family. This is Shion of the Sonozaki family we're talking about. Of course, she'll be forgiven. Of course, the people of the village do not remember the Hojos fondly, and time probably won't change that with the older generations, because they've got nothing going on. Here, this is Kimiyoshi's way of saying that Satoshi couldn't be forgiven, since the Hojos had died. It only made sense that he would too, but given he's one of the elders and a true Hinamizawa citizen, he probably genuinely does believe in the curse and that Satoshi must have actually been taken away by Oyashiro. He has no idea that the girl he's comforting right now suspects the village to be behind the disappearance, and what doesn't help his case is that it never made it out of the Sonozaki estate that the 3rd fingernail of a restitution was for Satoshi. Instead, everyone else thinks the 3rd nail was for herself, which makes her second guess and wonder if that actually was what the 3rd nail was intended for. In the visual novel, he's clearly confused and denies that someone had sentenced Satoshi to disappear, but his confusion isn't enough to save him from his fate as Shion tases him in the neck. In the anime, she kinda just gets mad and then tases him, but in the visual novel, it's not that crazy. Once again, the manga does always make her look absolutely terrifying. What makes it worse for him is that, unlike Oreo, he survives getting tased. Although we don't see it, while he's unconscious, she takes him and hangs him to one of the torture devices in the basement. Then, Shion calls up Keiichi. Here, he finally learns that Takano and Tomitake had died, and does a reasonable job convincing him of her delusions bringing the reality, and that if anyone is going to die next, it'll be the 2 of them. Keiichi, projecting and panicking that he could die, begins to blame everyone but himself, understandably so. Imagine being told you're going to die for something that you didn't even really want to do, and that you just wanted to go and watch your friend do a dance that was important to her. Instead, you snuck into a storehouse that you didn't want to go to with some people you don't know too well in something that freaked you out, and now you're gonna die for it. In the visual novel, he asks her how she's going to make restitution, and she hangs up, probably shocked that Keiichi would also say something like this since he doesn't know anything about the situation. He freaks out, wondering if he went too far, and hopes that she'll call him back. And then his phone does ring. I'm not sure if this happens in every visual novel route, but in the console port, Keiichi gets a phone call after Shion hangs up from Natsumi, asking where Kimiyoshi is. She refers to him as Oji-san, which means the Kimiyoshi we know is her uncle. Natsumi is a character many of you may not be familiar with, as she only appears in Himatsubushi-hen and Kagaboshi-hen, both of which are only available in Higurashi Kizuna, the DS ports of Higurashi that I don't believe were ever localized outside of Japan, ignoring some fan translations. Higurashi Kizuna is actually what debuted the story of Kotohogushi-hen, although that arc is now more known for its release on the PlayStation 3 and PS Vita. So Metsuhushi and Kagaboshi have never seen the light of day outside of the DS titles. At least, I don't think so. But rest assured, I will cover them for you all to be able to know the story behind them. Just thought this was a cool little detail to have them be connected here. On the other side of the story, Shion is also talking with the Kimiyoshis. They confirm to her that they don't know where he is, to which she urges them to assemble a group together to go look for him. Meanwhile, she goes downstairs to question Kimiyoshi, because he's actually in her basement of course, whether he knows what happened to Satoshi or not. Threatening to strangle him with the contraption he's in, he says that he doesn't have much reason to believe Satoshi's alive anymore. The person who supposedly killed Satoshi's aunt was likely a scapegoat, which we all already gathered, and the only place Satoshi would be disposed of is the well she threw out Oreo and earlier. Here, she imagines a conversation with Satoshi like she did earlier. He tells her that she found him. Shion says she wants to throw herself into the well and join him, and he urges her instead to live. Of course, this is all completely in her head, because we know Satoshi is still alive. The anime does a great job demonstrating this as she talks to her shadow created by a flashlight. She tells Mion she found Satoshi at the bottom of the well, and she agrees that's probably the only place he could be. Although Mion claims she would have saved Satoshi's life if she was there. Shion doesn't remotely believe her because of how Mion acted when she had to make restitution. How could someone acting so coldly and unlovingly save Satoshi? Or, so she thinks anyways. Which is kind of ironic given how she's acting towards her family right now. Something very important that was cut from the anime is how Shion yells at her, saying the name she has isn't hers. It was her own, that she wished she still had it because if she was Mion, she could have saved Satoshi. Her freakout in pretty much every medium for the scene is great, although I wish the anime again had included that the twins had permanently swapped at some point against their will. The next day, Keiichi and Shion both got little sleep again. Shion stayed up because she had to join the search for Kimiyoshi, which ended up running late. Keiichi stayed up because he was, again, genuinely terrified all night. Poor guy. Word has gotten around quickly about Kimiyoshi's disappearance, and this confuses Keiichi since he had figured he was supposed to disappear, or Shion. Kimiyoshi disappearing made no sense to him, as I'm sure it won't for a lot of the village. When class was let out, Shion confronted Rika outside, assuming that since Rika is the manager of the storehouse and a part of the Furude family, that she must know something. She does kind of let it out that she knew about something happening to Tomitake and Takano, but when asked if something should happen to Shion and Keiichi that went with them, Rika only replies that as long as they feel sorry, it should be okay. Confused as to why she's being so kind, Shion grabs her by the collar and questions her further. Rika says that Oyashiro-sama wouldn't get mad if people entered the storehouse, and that because the tools are scary looking, that they must be sorry. Shion asks how she'd decide that. Did Oyashiro-sama tell her? And she simply nods, which is true. Since she does have a direct line with Hanyuu, she knows that this isn't what would make Hanyuu mad. Although she was definitely mad because of what Takano was saying. Not satisfied that Rika is quote-unquote playing innocent, she says that she's just like her dad and smacks Rika upside the head, knocking her to the ground. This is interesting because at the beginning of the arc, Shion thought the previous priest's approach to the dam war was mature, but now she believes the fence sitting is immature and too passive in Rika's case. Without realizing it, she's begun to think exactly like one of the villagers. just in an inverse kind of way. Shion tells her that Keiichi is the only one left, and she needs to deal with it. Rika, of course, is confused, but Shion is trying to lay a trap here that if someone chose to kill Keiichi, it must be related to the Furude family, because she is sure there is some village underside that the three houses manage, and Rika is the only remaining leading member of the three houses. Of course, she isn't wrong. There is a village underside. She's just not right about who's behind it. After their encounter, Keiichi finds Rika on the ground and checks in on her. Here, she uses an analogy with cats to let Keiichi know she's aware exactly of what happened, but also wants to let him know that she both forgives him and will protect him. Back in Meakashi, Shion is thinking to herself about how Sadako should have been the obvious candidate for the curse last year instead of Satoshi, something she has thought about many times already at this point. And she has a moment of reflection where she realizes that she's doing all of the stuff she suspected Oreo of doing right now. She decides to make herself different from Oreo in that she will keep Keiichi alive. Her thoughts are interrupted by the doorbell. It's Rika, and she says she's here for soy sauce with a comically large bottle. Turns out that Oreo had given out papers around town that they had a ton of soy sauce, and that if anyone ever needed any, to stop by whenever they so pleased. Immediately, she's suspicious of Rika, who's insistent on coming in, but lets her in anyways, and takes her to where the soy sauce is. As she does, Shion can hear an extra footstep with Rika, just like she's heard several times before. Once they arrive at where the soy sauce should be located, Rika's expression is entirely different. In the anime, Rika just kind of looks at her and then pepper sprays her, but in both the visual novel and manga, there is a clear distinction between the expression on whoever this is and normal Rika, with this one looking clearly much more adult. Before Shion can respond, Rika pepper sprays her and gets on top of her, attempting to inject a syringe into her. Shion starts to fight back, so Rika pepper sprays her again, but is far too close, so she ends up getting hit in the blast. The two enter a standoff, with Rika holding the syringe and pepper spray, and Shion with her stun gun. What Rika wouldn't have expected was for Shion to kick up a pile of newspapers to cover for her. That way she can slide up and tase Rika. Once Rika's on the ground, she kicks her a few times, which was a little unnecessary, then takes the syringe from her and injects her with it. Now, this syringe, if you watch the anime, you might assume is H173, which is why Rika ended up killing herself. But in actuality, this is C120, also known as C103, the vaccine for Hinamizawa syndrome, or as close as they can get to a vaccine. This is what Sadako is seen being given in Matsuri Bayashi, and is a drug developed by Ire to address higher levels of the syndrome. Once injected, this will reduce a lot of set hormones that are heightened during high stages, making them act calmer and making the syndrome go dormant temporarily. However, if someone who is at low stages of the syndrome is injected, they will experience an extreme reduction in stamina, muscle spasms, and intense headaches, and they could potentially experience lymph node rashes similar to those of level 5 patients. Rika has the syringe here likely in an attempt to reduce Shion's symptoms of the syndrome so that she can survive this year's festival. We learn that at the end of Watanagashi-hen that Rika was captured and tortured by Shion, with a cracked syringe in her hand, meaning she never got to inject it during that Kakera. This time, she believes things will be different, but unfortunately, instead of not getting to use it, she is the one that's the recipient of it. Immediately, her body begins to convulse. Weak as she may be, she managed to stand up on her own 2 feet, barely gripping onto the wall, and in yet another detail cut from the anime, she weakly calls out to none other than Hanyuu. Yeah, that's right. Direct mentions of Hanyuu in Arc 5, compared to us not knowing she exists at all until like Arc 7 in the anime. This would have been a great detail to keep in, much like most of the hintings of her existence, so it would have made much more sense when she popped up, but I digress. Once Shion starts to throw out threats of torturing her, Rika grabs a giant kitchen knife. Shion assumes she's going to use it to fight her until the very end, and taunts her, actually getting really excited and riled up. But instead, Rika says that she isn't going to stick around and be tortured by Shion, bidding her farewell while propping the knife up because she's too weak to hold it herself. Then, she repeatedly starts to slam the knife into her neck. After doing this a few times, she looks back at Shion looking pretty terrifying, honestly, and then claws out her own throat so hard that her head is barely hanging on. After this, she falls to the floor, no longer alive. Rika, of course, did this because she saw how things went in Watanagashi-hen, and didn't want to be tortured again and have her life prolonged, keeping her from the next loop. So she does the act herself. It makes the anime's inclusion to have the scene in Watanagashi's intro questionable, because it makes you wonder if in the anime canon these arcs are different at all. The bit of her clawing her own throat to pieces after being injected with a syringe is also super important to solving the mystery of the series, as it's exactly what happens to Tomitake. This would give readers an idea finally as to what could be causing his unnatural death. Shion's reaction to all of this proves just how far gone she is. Of course, the scene from her laughing in the anime is ridiculously iconic now. People that haven't even consumed Higurashi know about this. In the manga and visual novel, she howls from how excited she is to watch Rika do this. In the visual novel, calling it an act of beauty, a dance of dedication to Oyashiro-sama. I do have to say, I probably think the demented laughter from the anime fits this scene the most, but regardless, she cheers since all the great houses have fallen. Everyone that opposed Satoshi and, supposedly, in her eyes, made him disappear, was no more. After this, we get much more insight into their permanent swap. Shion felt such anger for having swapped with Mion when she was pouting because she would never get to return being herself. The internal dialogue about her trying to convince her mom that she was Mion was really depressing. Imagine your own mother not being able to tell you apart from your sibling. I can't personally imagine that, because I don't have any, but I'm sure it's really sad. She goes to Mion in a fit of rage, accusing her of knowing that the banquet she'd get sashimi at would be when the tattoo was given. While lashing out, she takes the hair ribbon that Mion always uses, puts up her hair, and forces Mion to put her hair down, making the Mion in the cell now Shion, and the Shion outside the cell Mion, reversing their roles back to normal. In the visual novel, she says how the demon who has been asleep in her since Satoshi disappeared is now awake and ready to express its joy. This is why in the anime, Shion doesn't care when Keiichi or others call her Mion. She has reclaimed her name, and this is also why she starts to talk about the demon inside of her. Their conversation ends with Shion threatening to kill Mion in the most brutal, miserable way possible in the near future. She heads back inside and receives a phone call from Satoko, who is curious as where Rika has gone. Shion lies and says she's over for dinner, sinisterly inviting Satoko over as well. Although we don't see it, she does subdue and tie up Satoko to one of the torture devices in the basement. After this is done, Shion makes a phone call to Keiichi. Here, although Keiichi is 100% convinced that she is telling the truth, Shion intends to fill his head full of nonsense so that he becomes paranoid and dependent on her. One of which being that he should not, under any circumstance, trust Mion, which is ironic because in this moment, she is Mion. She intends to use him like a litmus test to see whether anyone on the underside of the village is still out there. She then masks Kimiyoshi's disappearance being because she opened up to him about going into the ritual storehouse, which is, funnily enough, true. This makes Keiichi realize that Rika is in danger since she knows about the two of them, coincidentally falling into Shion's agenda of making it look as if everyone around them is disappearing because of the curse. He then rushes to Rika and Sadako's house with Rena and Shion, who is, again, masked as Mion. And Shion is plotting to kill everyone before Keiichi and Mion to destroy their lives before killing them, which is interesting since she has since changed her mind about being different than Oreo and wanting to keep Keiichi alive. When they pull up to Rika and Sadako's place, they prop a ladder so Keiichi can check inside the house, Shion holding it down while Rena goes to check the main house. We have yet another iconic scene upon us, where Shion takes the ladder Keiichi is on and almost knocks him off. In the anime, she starts to tweak when Keiichi feels sympathy for Satoko and Rika, which pisses Shion off because she doesn't think Satoko deserves any pity. It is also a little hard to take this moment seriously because of how dated and poorly animated it looks. In the visual novel and manga, after Shion mentions that Satoko is an orphan, after her family and Satoshi left the picture, Keiichi tries to recall where he's heard the name Satoshi from before. This starts to set her off because Keiichi sits in his desk at school, defiling his desk. Or that's how she thinks of it anyways. She tries to calm herself down, which is surprising since if this was anyone else, she would really lose her temper here. Maybe she just hasn't realized it yet, but Shion seems to be developing a soft spot for Keiichi. She does end up getting more upset anyway because she realizes that since Rika and Sadako were best friends, Sadako could have avoided the curse because of Rika's influence. Then, once Keiichi feels sympathy for Sadako and Rika, after having been stirring and trying not to explode, she ends up letting loose anyways, verbalizing stuff we've all heard before about her thinking Satoshi was too good for Sadako, but in her mind in Meakashi, we see why she decides to torture Sadako. It wasn't fair to her that Sadako was forgiven while Satoshi was not, when in her eyes, Sadako was the root of all of the problems. So, since Rika was dead, and there was no god to bring down the victims for the curse, she once again changes her mind about this whole situation, deciding to enact Oyashiro's curse on her own. Compared to the anime, her anger is much more clear and taken much more seriously instead of her face looking like contorting rubber. Before we can get back to the Sonozaki estate, Rena brings over some help and keys to the house. Keiichi, naturally, is terrified at what he just saw. In his eyes, Shion was right. Something was wrong with Mion. They unlock the house, rush in, and of course, no one is home. No one seems to notice a thing out of the ordinary, but Rena, as perceptive as ever, notices that dinner is freshly made and unconsumed, and that there are other dishes neatly wrapped in the fridge. While a village-wide search begins for the two, Keiichi is overwhelmed with guilt for potentially being the cause of both of their disappearances. In the anime, he sheds a tear, but in the visual novel, and especially in the manga, he sobs his heart out, alone in the woods by himself. Rena comes to comfort him, asking him why he's blaming himself and why he's worried, but he can't tell her why, because he's worried she'll disappear too. In an incredibly warm, cozy moment, Rena assures him that she won't disappear, no matter what. Damn, bro! Rena coming in and stealing the spotlight and Mion and Shion's arc, fucked up, honestly. Although this is not the last one, there are many good Rena moments in this arc. She kind of girl bosses the fuck up. The manga paneling for this might actually be one of my favorite moments in the entire series. It's just so tender. Rena's kindness in this scene is meant to cue in readers about the reality of Onikakushi-hen and how Rena was actually trying to save him from himself. Here, she's doing the same thing, and it's not hallucinated at all. This moment of understanding and confiding in each other will set up, unbeknownst to everyone, that the key to surviving is compassion, understanding, and communication with your friends. Once comforted and guided back to civilization by Rena, Shion shows up and demands to know if he was okay, or if anyone was watching him or chasing him. He thinks this is concern for him, but in reality, Shion is still trying to probe if anyone is after them. Seeing as he was okay, Shion takes this as no one is coming after them anymore. My Chad Oishi then rolls up to the scene, urging people to go home and offering to drive Keiichi himself. After giving him some coffee, he tells Keiichi that 2 of the 3 houses have already disappeared, and that he believes Mion is next, and then he asks for Keiichi's help with the case. Before Keiichi can give an answer, Oishi is summoned back into town. His parting words are that Keiichi should get a good night's sleep, because his courage might end up being what saves many of his friends. This is extreme foreshadowing to Keiichi showing his courage in Sumihoroboshi-hen, Minaguroshi-hen, and of course, Matsurebayashi-hen. Without him, Rika admits that the cycle may never have been broken. Funny how this line looks as if it could just be a throwaway line until further context is added. This happens a lot with the visual novel, I've noticed. As Keiichi goes into his house, in Meakashi-hen, Shion is on her way to her estate's basement. Upon entering, she notices that Kimiyoshi appears to have died while she was out. In the visual novel, Sadako has to watch as Shion stabs Kimiyoshi in several places to see if he's still alive, and a few hours earlier, had watched as Shion disposed of Rika's body. Shion openly states to Sadako that she does intend to kill her, and Mion begs for Shion to spare Sadako's life. Out of spite, she blames Mion for not having saved Satoshi as she stabs Sadako in the arm with a blade, twisting it in her arm. Mion continues to beg for Shion to spare Sadako, but what she doesn't realize is that Shion's attacks on Sadako right now are completely to make Mion suffer, hopelessly listening to her friend die. In a fucked up way of teasing her, Shion says she'll spare Sadako if Mion can apologize 1,000 times. Immediately, Mion starts to apologize as quickly and fastly as she can, but this didn't stop Shion from continuing her unrelenting stabbing on Sadako. While she had been quiet before, Sadako's pain became too much to bear, and even though he'd been missing for over a year, she began to beg for her brother. After all this time, Shion finally can let free this feeling she's had towards Sadako. Shion tells her that she was a burden to him, that she had put a ton of pressure on him, and for that crime she must pay. As she beat her, sliced her, tore her skin off, she would berate Sadako again and again for leeching off of him, letting him get injured for her sake, and that she never once thought of what he must have been going through. In the visual novel, she feels a sense of relief for finally being able to tell Sadako what she had been thinking for over a year. However, to Shion's surprise, Sadako agrees with her. She feels she's cornered him, and that she is the reason he disappeared. She's felt that since the day he left, but even still, she's certain he will come back one day, and that when he does, she will prove to him how well she can take care of herself. She won't cry to him anymore. She won't hide behind him anymore. She's grown up, and she wants him to know she can take care of herself and live on her own. Shion mocks her for thinking Satoshi will come back and continues her onslaught, but Sadako doesn't back down. She knows he will come back one day, and when he does, she'll apologize for being such a baby. For now, in this moment, she'll stay strong. She won't cry out for his help. She won't scream. She's going to endure it all on her own. Shion, in her lack of maturity, sees this as a challenge and tries to inflict as much pain on Sadako as possible. Sadako is willing to let Shion stab her all she wants because, to her, Satoshi is watching. In her last breaths, she reaffirms that she won't call for help because the pain she's feeling in her eyes must be what he felt. He will see for sure how much she's changed. And then, her body goes limp. This scene, the first time around, didn't make me feel too sad. In fact, I honestly didn't care for it very much. Yes, it was sad, but it just didn't have a lot of emotional impact to it. But this time around, it made me cry. Sadako had lost both of her parents, been abused by her aunt and uncle, faced ridicule and neglect from the people of the village, and when she thought nothing could get any worse, she lost her brother, the only person left in her life that she could rely on. From the very moment he disappeared, she not only mourned him, she knew that wherever he was, she was probably the root of it all. For 1 entire year, Sadako put on a brave front like no other, when inside of her head, she was blaming herself for losing one of the last things she really held dear. Thankfully, she's able to find new family through Rika, but now she's lost Rika too. She genuinely, at this point in the story, has nothing left. For all the hardship, mistreatment, abuse, and loss she has gone through, it all came to a close in an act of pure brutality, but one she faced so bravely for going through everything she had. Sadako, you are strong. I'm sure Satoshi would be incredibly proud of you in this moment. Shion finds herself perplexed by what just happened. She tried so hard to crush Sadako's strength, but she couldn't, and she realized that Sadako never once doubted that Satoshi wasn't coming back one day. Meanwhile, she had assumed he was gone, dead, never coming back. Satoshi wasn't the one to see how strong Sadako had gotten. It was Shion. Shion acted immaturely and irrationally. She admired Rika's dad for being mature, when in reality, she lacked maturity herself. She realizes that her claim to avenge him meant nothing. She was using revenge as an excuse to not have to confront her actions. She was blinded by hatred because she was too scared to confront her sadness. In Sadako's dead eyes, Shion only saw happiness. She saw the two reunite, and Satoshi telling her that it's okay to cry now. After spending a year without him, Sadako lets it all out. Then, Shion remembers. She remembers her promise she had made to Satoshi to take care of Sadako. Falling to her knees, Shion is met with the reality of her actions and how genuinely she had fucked up. From the very moment Satoshi left, she assumed he was dead and blamed everyone for it instead of coming to terms with it. Instead of honoring his request, she put the most blame on Sadako. Scanning the room, she realizes that she never once tried to honor his promise. She looks at Sadako's wounds, and the gravity of it all truly sinks in. She sobs on Sadako's body in a panel in the manga that is really depressing. Not just because of what she's just done, but because she realizes that no one is going to come and save her. She then perceives the person that's been following her this whole arc as herself, watching her make her own mistakes and letting it just happen. Somewhere down the line, she had given up on herself. In the visual novel, she tries her best to convince herself that she has no reason to be sad, no reason to cry. She shouldn't. She's a demon. She tries to convince herself that she is having fun by telling it to Mion, but we know she isn't anymore. Once again, Shion is trying to run from her own sadness, but she won't be able to for long. She throws an empty threat at Mion that Keiichi will be next and leaves the basement to go and contact him. To say that the Deen anime underdelivered on this scene would be an extreme understatement. Yes, it is iconic in the anime, but seeing what we could have gotten, wow, The anime makes her seem like a wild, uncontrollable yandere, while the visual novel and manga show she begins to self-reflect and feel remorse for her actions. She fucked up. She fucked up bad, real bad. She isn't deranged, love-obsessed, or whatever. She's immature and she's hurting. She's acting out about the only way she's learned how to from her family, with violence. It's the wrong way to take it, sure, and the anime doesn't do a good job conveying that at all. In fact, it almost feels like a mockery, given that for whatever reason, she fucking pisses herself. She doesn't even reflect at all on her actions, she just goes on and continues her killing. It's hard to defend it because the anime even has internal dialogue. They can easily have shown how her own actions ended up hurting Shion. The scene is brutal and gory, but it's heartbreaking. It left such an impact on me, especially seeing how Sadako reacted here, that it made me dislike the ending for Go and Sotsu even more. It's just such a pain, but that's for another video. Everyone in the village seems to barely sleep that night. The next day, Rena comes to check on Keiichi. She asks if he can go to school with her, so that way he won't stay at home and worry the whole time. Even though she isn't doing the best with the disappearance of her friends, she still is looking after Keiichi. They go to their usual meetup spot to see if Shion is there, but she isn't. She did stay up late into that night killing, after all. The whole air in the village was different that day. Every parent for all of the other kids was either walking or driving their kids to school, and the principal was standing guard at the entrance to it with a wooden sword. The atmosphere at school was also obviously depressing, given now the 2 empty seats in the classroom. During lunch, Rena and Keiichi share their meals together and try their best to cheer each other up, but they decide to try and be open to each other about what could be going on. While the current police speculation was that Rika and Sadako went into Okonomiya on their bikes to play and disappeared there, neither Rena or Keiichi believe that. Rena is very convinced that they didn't, in fact. She explains to Keiichi that the dish they were making they bought stuff for on their way home from school, and it was completely finished when Rena checked it, meaning that they had been making it up to dinner time. Yet, for some reason, neither of them had eaten their food, and why would the 2 of them go out to play at night? Because of this, Rena concludes that for whatever reason, they suddenly and abruptly left the house to go eat dinner somewhere else. When she looked further, she noticed their large bottle of soy sauce was missing, so Rena further concludes that they must have gone to someone's house to get a refill, and that is when they disappeared. In fact, she's able to deduce that Rika was the one who went to go get it. Sadako must have called up the person they visited, and even the exact reply the person on the phone must have given Sadako to invite her over. She's damn near fucking Sherlock Holmes out here. On his way home, Keiichi promises to tell Rena what's going on, or at least what he fully knows, as he's ambushed by Oishi. Here, Oishi explains to Keiichi what Kimiyoshi was doing before he went missing. The poor guy was experiencing intense hemorrhoids and was going to a hospital to treat it. I wonder if this happens in every arc and we just never know about it. This was done in secret, and after that he went straight to the meeting. This makes Keiichi realize that based on what he had done that day, there was no room for Shion to meet up with Kimiyoshi and confide in him, especially since everything he did was in secret. This means that Shion had to have been the last person to see him, but not wanting to suspect her, he forcibly stops his train of thought. Oishi asks Keiichi to tell him what's in the storehouse, because he's the only one left. In Okonomiya, Mion Sonozaki has been missing ever since the day after the festival. As far as the police are aware, Keiichi is the only survivor from the storehouse trip now, which shouldn't be right since Keiichi just talked to Shion on the phone the other night. He finds himself in a daze once he's inside. He doesn't know what to think. He's afraid to receive another phone call from whoever has been pretending to be Shion, and then it rang. He picks up the phone, and none other than Shion is on the line. Their phone calls are the same in both Meakashi and Watanagashi. He asks her what she thinks happened to Rika and Sadako and the mayor. It's very clear in the manga and visual novel that during this call, Shion is still shaken up by what happened with Sadako. She feels his strength and hopes that they're okay, just like how Sadako was so convinced Satoshi was watching her. Since she still is trying to convince herself she's a demon, she decides to be completely transparent with him. She tells him that she believes that Kimiyoshi is dead, but he's adamant that Rika and Sadako must still be alive. Shion feels envious that he's able to keep them alive within his heart so strongly when she gave up on Satoshi so easily, but she elaborates that she believes they are also dead. Keiichi screams. Shion, noting that it sounds like knowing they might be dead personally agonized him, and it does. He feels responsible for their disappearances, much like Sadako felt responsible for Satoshi's. The pained mourning of wondering why Rika and Sadako had to die, why the curse has to continue, makes Shion imagine Satoshi is speaking through Keiichi's lips. The paneling in the manga is particularly powerful. Keiichi knows that whoever he's on the phone with has to be responsible for Rika and Sadako's deaths. Killing Sadako must have really been eye-opening for her, because she breaks down saying that she cursed the only person she thought she had left, Kimiyoshi, to die. He spoke so sincerely and kindly to her. She regretted opening up to him, and hearing his disdain for Satoshi because it made her act irrationally. She is continuing to realize how much she fucked up. Then, while she's crying, Keiichi begins to question her about when she met with Kimiyoshi. While she cries, she expresses in her head how proud she is of Keiichi to figure this out, and she begs him, pleads, for him to corner the demon in her so she has no escape. Once he's connected all the pieces, she forces a laugh and hangs up. Hurry and chase me down. Hurry and free me are her thoughts after the phone call. She didn't think she had anyone left, but the person that she'd been trying to figure out how to kill this entire time was someone who could come and save her from herself. On Keiichi's end, he imagines how demented she must look when the call ends, and he once again struggles to fall asleep for a third night in a row. The next morning, his parents try to comfort him and offer to let him stay home. Keiichi thinks to himself again that this is all his fault, and that he turned a tranquil village into a hellhole. I imagine he must be feeling this even more because, as we learned in the last video, before they moved to Hinamizawa, Keiichi was in a really rough patch in life. Moving to this village was supposed to be their escape, and instead awful things are happening to the people he cares about. Keiichi must think that he's cursed. Rena comes to visit him again, with some papers in hand about what's going on in the village as of late. He lets her know he's going to take a break from school. Instead of forcing him to go, she is immediately understanding and wants him to do whatever is best for himself. He asks if she knew about him and sneaking into the storehouse, and she did. As it turns out, Rena and Mion knew that night that Keiichi had snuck into the storehouse with Shion. Rena lets him know that Mion was mad, but not because of what he did, because he wasn't honest with her about what he had done and seeing Shion. Rena tells him that he needs to admit to his crime to the person he committed it against, and that he needed to apologize. Right here in Watanagashi, the beginning of the themes for atonement and communication are set. As Rena goes to leave for school, Keiichi finds the notice Oreo had posted about their extra soy sauce in the list of village papers. When Keiichi hesitantly points it out, Rena admits to having already known and was suspicious of Mion. He quickly slips on his shoes and, expressing the only way she'll stop killing is if he apologizes. Rena, realizing that if she doesn't go, he might disappear too, grabs him by the back of the shirt and says firmly that she will not let him go. Then, the two set out for the Sonozaki estate. Outside of the estate, Oishi is waiting with another officer. Rena and Keiichi decide to tell Oishi that they're convinced Mion, or as we know her Shion, is the one behind the disappearances of these last few days. After having explained it all, Oishi reveals that he's also suspected Mion, or the Sonozakis for that matter, being behind this all, but he has no warrant or way to get into the house. Rena is able to deduce, again, fucking Sherlock Holmes over here, that Oishi had been trying to get close to Keiichi to coerce him into going inside or exposing the truth of the Sonozakis. Once inside, he could find out what was going on, or if Oishi suspected Keiichi was in danger, he could legally enter the premises without a warrant. Rena and Keiichi agree to be part of his plan, as long as they bring reinforcements to surround the premises in case something does happen to them. Then he drives the two as close as he can get them to the estate. In Meakashi, once she hears the doorbell ring, she opens it. She went unarmed, not caring if it was the police or Keiichi or whoever. In her mind, as she invites them in, she says she plans to fight until the end, but begs for them to not hesitate to kill her. What I like in the visual novel's interpretation is that before getting serious and down to business, they chat like normal, as if nothing is wrong. It shows that even when things are tense, even when they suspect her of murder, that they are always going to be friends. It's only when Shion pours them some tea do they hesitate, worried she did something to it, and begin to talk to her about what they suspect is going on. Keiichi apologizes for sneaking into the ritual storehouse, but Shion clearly isn't too interested in that. So they lay out their evidence of what they believe happened, re-explained Rena's theory about them getting soy sauce from somewhere close by, and they show her the pamphlet offering soy sauce to reaffirm their theories. She's cornered, and she decides to reintroduce herself. She isn't the Shion they know, and she isn't the Mion they already know. She's the real Shion, the true successor to the Sonozaki family. In her head, she decides that this now will be a little game. If they can figure out that she isn't the Mion that's their best friend, then they can win. If they can't, she will capture Keiichi and kill him in front of Mion. Then she explains the story of the ancient village that she heard from Takano, making some parts of it up, so it is entirely possible that everything she tells them right now is completely a lie, since Takano also probably made up the story of the village to Shion. What she does tell the truth about is the demon tattoo on her back. the character for demons and their names, and how she believes she's inherited a demon, although the tattoo is actually on another person, not this person. She admits to killing Sadako and Rika, and Rena asks Shion to turn herself in as Mion. Rena has lost the game. She couldn't see that she wasn't actually Mion. She agrees to turn herself in, but first asks Rena if she can have 30 minutes with Keiichi alone. But Rena makes sure to warn him to make her not lose her temper. They link arms and walk through the garden, and Shion tells Keiichi that Mion really liked him. She has a bit of an identity crisis. Who is she really? The twins were both simultaneously Shion and Mion because they shared so much together. She thinks she should be Mion. That's who she was originally, but then she was Shion. How was she supposed to make Rena answer a question that she didn't even know the answer for? Keiichi also has her questioning herself. If Mion fell in love with him, could she do the same? She opens up about how Mion is still alive and offers to take him to her, although in her mind she plots to try and kill him. Again, going back on what she said she would do earlier and leaving him alive. She warns him it'll be graphic, but he doesn't care. She's his best friend. In her mind, for just a moment, she kinda understands why Mion loves Keiichi. In the Watanagashi-hen manga, we see Satoshi's smile next to Keiichi. Once in the basement, she begins to confess her sins all to him, all of the harm and hurt she has caused. Yet, through it all, he smiles at her. Just like Sadako protected the idea of Satoshi in her heart, Keiichi was not going to let this change the image of Mion he held inside himself. Once they get to Mion's cell, they have a short and bittersweet reunion before Mion smacks him with a chair. What the fuck? While he's briefly knocked out and Mion begs for his life, Shion straps him up to a torture device. She plans to see her revenge for Satoshi through all the way to the very end, since she's come way too far to give up now. As she's about to get started with nailing his fingers in, Keiichi finally asks who she is. This person, to him, isn't acting at all like the Shion from a few moments ago. She asks if not Mion, then who is she? And to her surprise, he calls her a demon. She's no longer Mion or Shion because he's protecting the idea of both of them within his heart. No matter what, neither of them can be killers. Initially, Shion thinks this is ridiculous, but Keiichi wouldn't back down at all. Then she tells him the truth of why this all happened. For a year now, she had suppressed the demon, these violent urges within her. It started earlier, if you can recall, when Satoshi first disappeared. After his disappearance, she missed him, but she managed to keep happy memories of him in her heart. Then, they all came to the forefront again when she saw Mion cry over Keiichi not picking her for the doll. Why? She was jealous. Jealous that the person she loved was still alive when all Shion had was memories. That jealousy awoke violence deep within her heart. Keiichi realizes that the time he apologized about the doll, it wasn't to Mion, it was to Shion. And then today, he had come to apologize again, presented another opportunity to, and yet he didn't apologize for it today. She's about to begin again, but for some reason, she finds herself hesitating. Something she didn't do with anyone else. With the pressure on him for everything that has happened now firmly in his brain being his fault, he gives Shion the okay to do whatever to him, as long as it'll help her feel better. Shocked, Shion asks why. And Keiichi's reply is that this would be nothing compared to how much he hurt Mion. All he asks is that she forgive Shion, the one who is Mion in her cage right now, and for the demon to leave Mion, who is Shion, so she could return back to normal. Shion jokes about how he isn't even going to beg for his own life, and even though he's tied up and potentially about to be tortured, Keiichi manages to joke back with her that he'd actually like to ask for 3 things in that case. Joking in such a dire situation while still looking out for those around him, at that moment, Shion understood completely why Mion loved him. She agrees to keep him alive, but since she's already decided to kill Mion, she won't change her mind on that. And since she has taken the role as Mion Sonozaki, she can't give back the body to Mion since she'll never be the Mion that Keiichi knows. As the police try to break in from outside, Shion bids Keiichi farewell and tells him that if she sees him again, that it's not really her. Before she tases him, she apologizes for disgracing Mion. Shion is aware that even though she was originally Mion Sonozaki, that she will never truly be able to live up to that name anymore. All she has done is run it through the mud. Then she tases him and knocks him out. Even in both Watanagashi and Meakashi, this scene, despite its extreme setting with torture looming in the background, is surprisingly tender and sweet. Keiichi is for sure such a good fucking guy. I can't believe that in the circumstances he's in, he's not worried about himself. Instead, he feels bad for apologizing to the wrong person and not giving Mion the doll, and he still feels responsible for Rika and Sadako's deaths, even though he wasn't involved in them at all. For all he knows, he is going to die, yet he never once feels sorry for himself or doubts the character of the Sonozakis. Through and through, he has a heart for other people. Even through this arc alone, he has been a great character to follow. This scene, I think, is what solidifies Keiichi as a fantastic protagonist. However, Shion's job isn't done yet. As she told Keiichi, Shion, or rather as we know her Mion, the younger twin, was destined to die. Shion forces the two to switch back to their original roles, has Mion descend the stairs into the old well where the bodies have been thrown, and then gets the stun gun to her head. Before she meets her fate, Mion asks if this was still to get revenge for Satoshi, to which Shion is like, yeah, of course. Mion opens up that she too loved Satoshi, and that when he went missing, she also did some investigating. Ready to accuse Oryo of having been the reason behind Satoshi's disappearance, she confirms with certainty that the Sonozaki family did nothing to him. In fact, they had not even been involved in any of the Cotton Festival deaths over the years. Oryo would just say things that sounded suspicious or related to the crime to convince people around her that she was behind it, when in reality they had nothing to do with them at all. Shion, naturally, does not believe this. I mean, why would she? Takano and Oishi both seem very convinced the Sonozakis were involved and behind all of the deaths, so why would that not be the case? But Mion is convinced that she wasn't lying. Oryo had no idea who had been causing the curse. She couldn't find the culprit, even within the great family's ties. Shion begins to come to the worst, uncomfortable realization. She didn't think Mion was lying, and she didn't think Oryo would lie to Mion either. Because Oryo couldn't find who had done it, that meant that Kimiyoshi wasn't involved and probably thought Oryo was behind it all. Yet Rika had a syringe that did to her exactly what Tomitake did to himself. So, could it be the Furude family? While the thought initially makes sense, it doesn't make any sense because both of last year's victims were Furudes. So, by process of elimination, Rika can't be involved, the Kimiyoshis can't be involved, and the Sonozakis weren't involved and claim no one from the village was behind the curse. That means Shion has been enacting a fake revenge? All she has been doing is killing innocent people. She was the cause of the 5th year's curse. Shion still tries her best not to believe this. In a scene that directly mirrors Rena pleading for Keiichi to believe and trust her in Onikakushi, Mion begs for Shion to trust and believe in her. But Shion can't believe her. She's come this far. She's killed so many people. She's caused so much harm. She can't stop now, or everything would have been pointless. She can't believe Mion, or else who is she going to hold responsible? Shion says that if she is innocent, to go to heaven and to apologize to Satoshi for her. Then, she zaps her off the ladder as Mion falls to her death. The police finally rush in to save any survivors, finding the Shion Sonozaki, which in their records had been missing. They can tell it's Shion because they're aware of the tattoo and it's not on her back. They also find and release Keiichi, taking him and Rena into custody for questioning. By this point in other arcs, the Great Hinamizawa disaster would have struck. Since this is our first time talking about it in the Timeline series, I'll explain it. With Takano having set up residents in the village to research and find the cause of the syndrome, some emergency provisions were put in place if things went wrong. One of those is Emergency Manual 34, a document that says if the villagers all appear to be rising in levels of the syndrome, then they will kill the entire village. Takano's grandfather believed that the death of the queen carrier, Rika, would cause the village all to erupt into level 5 freakouts. Thus, in most arcs, Rika's death is by Takano's hands. This way, she can claim the village is going insane and have Japan respond, affirming her grandfather's theories about the village and end up proving them correct. Japan's response, if this happens, is to release gas that is being held at the Yaguchi Quarry, suffocating the villagers and killing them all, creating the Great Hinamizawa disaster. Since in Meakashi and Watanagashi, Takano cannot confirm whether Rika dies or not, the disaster can never be approved and the village can continue to live on. So, since the disaster cannot happen, the villagers are continuing their ways of life. However hard that may be given how many people have died in the last week or so, on top of the 3 great houses completely falling to ruin. Keiichi tells us how Shion was wounded psychologically, with every shadow she sees now looking like Mion. This makes sense, given that after killing his aunt, Satoshi saw her in everyone. Those that go level 5 just cannot recover from their own mental torture. Not wanting to stay at the Sonozaki estate any longer, she decides to hole up in her apartment in Okinomiya. Because Mion fell into the well, and the police don't know the location of the well, all of the bodies have been yet to be rediscovered, so everyone is under the assumption that Mion went missing after committing the crime. Because of the events of this festival, Keiichi's family plans to move away from Hinamizawa since the city ended up not being the escape that they had wished it was. Poor Rena. She admits she'll be lonely since out of the friend group she'll be the only one left in the village. To comfort Rena, he says that somewhere out there, Mion, Satoko, and Rika have all met up and are ready to play some board games. All they're doing now is waiting for Rena and Keiichi. This manages to comfort her some, and he notes that he will never forget this place for the rest of his life. Later that night, Shion is haunted again by the ghost of Mion. Of course, we know this to actually be a hallucination of the syndrome. In some panels, it's clear that she is the only one in the room, and in other panels in the manga and visual novel, it appears as if she is speaking for Mion through her own mouth. As a way to fight back against this Mion that she perceives to be haunting her, she decides she will sneak out of her apartment and kill the person that she loved most, Keiichi. Sometime after everything had happened, Keiichi went to the toy shop and bought another one of those dolls. That way, in case Mion ever did come back, he could finally give it to her. Not to Rena, not accidentally to Shion, but to Mion. He could atone for the grave mistake that he had made. He hopes that wherever she is out there, that she doesn't have any family obligations anymore, that she doesn't have to worry about upholding a family name and can just be herself, and that there's a hobby shop she can frequent. This little detail of a scene with him crying, hoping to give her the doll one day, is heartbreaking. In a way that mirrors how Shion felt after Satoshi had gone missing, Keiichi mourns her. And this new life he had formed after he thought he was done making major mistakes, he made another one that deeply cost him his entire way of life. He had lost 2 amazing friends. He was going to have to move away from the town he came to love and lose another friend he cared about deeply, and in the process he severely hurt and lost his best friend. He lost all of this just because he was so afraid of their friendship being affected by giving the doll to her, and he doesn't ever want to make that mistake again. Then, a rock hits his window. It's Mion, or at least that's what he thinks. We know that this is Shion. Ignoring her message to him to never approach her if she saw her again, he rushes downstairs with the doll in hand. Clearly in a panicked, frenzied state, saying that someone is right behind her right now, she falls to the ground. Keiichi goes to help her up and check on her, resulting in a knife right in his stomach. As Keiichi falls to the ground, Shion expresses how happy she is to have done this, finally killing everyone she wanted to. Before the Mion she hallucinated could drag her to the grave, she got revenge against her, and, in her mind, finally closed out all of the people she had wanted to kill. Although, Shion is pretty convinced that this is a dream of hers. She doesn't think she's left her apartment. Not sure where she is or how she got there, she tries to make her way back to where she last remembers being, her apartment's balcony. As she climbs up to go back in there, she slips and falls, hitting her head on the elevator compartment. She comes to her senses. No more ghosts of Mion following her, or desires to kill or commit violent acts. All that was there was just her and the moon. She wonders where she went wrong. Where did she make the wrong choice to bring her to this very moment? She recalls her childhood and her time as Mion, her earlier relationship with her sister, moments between her and Satoshi. Then, she remembers again, because Satoshi reminded her when she killed Satoko. It was when Satoshi entrusted her with Satoko. She begins to tell herself the things she wished she had told him, like believing he'd return and that she would take care of Satoko, that she loved him. And, for the first time in both arcs, she apologizes to Satoko, to Mion, to everyone. The only way she can make things right, in her mind, is to finish the job and end her life. So, she rolls over the edge and falls one last time. Why was I born? Why did I even ever need to exist? What was the point in my meaningless life? On top of wishing she hadn't been born, these are all thoughts that ran through her mind. She thanks everyone for treating her kindly, for loving her, even though she turned out the way she did. She apologizes one more time to everyone. If Satoshi ever gave her a second chance, she promises that she would never make that same mistake again. She gives him one final goodbye and lets him know one more time before she dies that she loves him. In the visual novel, we are given a piece of her journal. She writes about how she had hoped that it was all just a dream, that she had been put in a coma before Satoshi disappeared, and that she would wake up soon. While she's idealistic, she knows that it won't end up that way. It ends with her declaring, once and for all, "I'm sorry that I was born," as she dies. After her death in the visual novel, and as she dies in the manga, she envisions what her life would be like if she did take care of Satoko, and it's lovely. She makes food for her and visits them at school. She teases Satoko and chases her around. The entire group is having a grand, good time. Even though Shion's life in Meakashi was tragic and full of heartbreak, she was right. she would never make this mistake again. For all of the mistakes she's made in this series, she is the first character to fully come to the realization of what she has done and desire to atone for it. After this, in every arc we see her in, Shion is on the right side of the coin. She takes care of Satoko, wants what's best for her well-being. She fulfills her promise to Satoshi. All of the suffering that Shion went through in Miyakashi, even if she ended up dying, was not meaningless. She might be sorry that she was born here, but it is her life, her errors and tribulations, and her realizations of how wrong that she was that leads Shion in future Kakera to do the right thing, to help others and to show them the same love that she was shown in this arc. Without Shion and Miyakashi, she would have never been able to be happy. What Ryu is trying to convey to us is to never apologize for being born. You will make mistakes, and you will hurt people, but you will always, in some form, be given the chance to make up for that, and to do the right thing again. When given the chance, do not let it slip by. Make sure you do the right thing. As for Shion, I'm sure she'll be happy to know that the reality she hoped for with Satoko will come soon enough. Now, all that's left is Watanagashi-hen. Keiichi wakes up in the hospital and Oishi tells him about everything that has happened. How Shion had fallen from her balcony and how they had found all of the dead bodies in the well of the basement. However, among those bodies was the body of Mion Sonozaki. They can tell because of the tattoo is on her back, making her the legitimate heir to the family. Although this means that whoever he was convinced was Mion the night before wasn't Mion. But it also couldn't have been Shion since she died that night in a different city. This is where we also learn for the first time that Takano had died 24 hours before her body was found, which isn't possible since she was at the festival a few hours before the body was found. The only reason this deduction was revealed in this arc is because life had gone on long enough past when the disaster was supposed to happen that the truth was able to be revealed. Although it made no sense to Keiichi. A dead person had started their doomed course, and somehow another dead person had ended it? Poor guy though. Because of the intense paranoia and stress Shion continually put on him throughout the arc about somebody watching him or wanting to kill him, coupled with being almost tortured to death, almost being killed, and seeing two people alive that are supposed to be dead, Keiichi is almost certainly at level 5 of Hinamizawa syndrome. That's why he hallucinates Mion appearing under his hospital bed, coming to kill him once and for all. After this, even if we don't see it, Keiichi claws out his own throat and the arc comes to a close. Poor Rena. She was worried about being the last one in town. Now she is confirmed as the last one to be alive, period. Before making this video, I had never understood the love for Mion, Shion, and especially not Satoshi. Yes, they were all characters that did in fact exist, but I saw no reason to ever appreciate them. I didn't care much for the anime versions of Meakashi and Watanagashi. However, after reading the visual novel and manga, these two are easily some of the strongest in the entire series. I love how we blend the two together to give us an entire full picture as to what's going on. I mentioned it some earlier, but the visual novel and manga really go the extra way to give so much depth to Satoshi that was extremely lacking in the anime. At some points, I believed Satoshi could have been completely written out of the series, but I no longer believe that. He is so necessary for why Satoko and Shion are the way they are, and how the two end up in the future, on top of crucial reasons for the game club to exist. The Sonozaki twins also are nothing short of fantastic. This is the first time where I really felt the title of it made so much sense. The eye-opening arc is literally the story of Shion having her eyes opened to the truth of her actions and herself as a person. I really enjoy how we get to see a character who believes they're emotionally mature realize they aren't mature at all, and they have committed so many sins and grave atrocities. Now, I finally understand why so many people are really frustrated with the Deen's adaptation. In fact, scratch that, it's almost hard to call it an adaptation at all. It cuts so much from both stories and doesn't even try to differentiate them from each other, ironically enough making them appear the same from the outside just like Mion and Shion. It feels like maybe only half the story made it to the final product. The manga and visual novel really do just go that extra mile to deliver something that is genuinely heartbreaking to witness, and make later arcs in hindsight so much more rewarding and meaningful. Hell, it even adds detail to previous arcs. And I gotta say, getting the full scope of Shion's backstory makes me furious that she wasn't included at all in Go and Sotsu's story. I clowned on people for being upset that she wasn't in it, and now I'm mad. Why didn't we reunite Satoshi and Shion in the end? In fact, the entire scene with Satoko, where she explains that she is going to live on and be something her brother can be proud of, makes the entirety of Go and Sotsu feel completely pointless. Let me stop there though. That's a rant for another video. To finish closing this out, let's go over the bad ending for Miakashi. The bad ending is available, as far as I'm aware, only in the PS3 version. For those unaware, visual novels let the reader choose the path the story unfolds. When Shion is about to begin torturing Keiichi, she is given two options. At that time, I became aware of Keiichi's gaze, and then I turned around to face Keiichi. When you pick turned around to face Keiichi, this results in the good ending that we already discussed. But if the reader picks I became aware of Keiichi's gaze, Keiichi realizes that the person about to torture him isn't Mion, but it's not the demon he claims in the true route either. It's Shion. She admits to having fallen in love with Keiichi and wants to spare him, both because of this and because Keiichi truly had nothing to do with the revenge subplot at all. Her revenge was towards the village and the three families, not him. But she's jealous. Jealous that he can tell the difference between the two of them, but Satoshi couldn't. Unlike when Keiichi assumed that the person in front of him was a demon, protecting the image of both Mion and Shion within him, here after he says this is Shion, his demeanor is cold, angry, and disgusted with her. Due to her feeling that there are, in fact, differences between her and Mion, after her thinking for so long that there wasn't any, and having the second person she's loved treat her so coldly, her mind snaps and she succumbs to the syndrome immediately, clawing her throat out and killing herself. The police rush in, and Keiichi and Mion are rescued by them. Since Shion is now dead, the perspective switches to Keiichi. When Keiichi tells Rena that his family plans to move away, Rena urges him to tell Mion about his moving away too. Since Oreo and Shion are both dead, Mion wants to move to Tokyo and keep Hinamizawa out of her mind as much as possible. Because of how sad she seemed, Keiichi offered to spend some time exclusively with her, on a trip. Although it is implied, and interpreted as such by both Keiichi and Mion, that this is a date. This is especially a milestone because as future head of the family, Mion rarely gets to travel at all. Once out on their trip, Mion is ecstatic. They spent hours exploring this new, unnamed city to their heart's content, and decided after a little bit to enjoy themselves in a local park. It's clear that the trip did both of them some good, and that they felt on a path to some form of emotional recovery. Mion needs to take a run to the bathroom, and while she's gone, someone comes over to talk to Keiichi. Then, his perspective is cut. Oh no, that can't be good. Shortly, Mion comes back, teasing Keiichi because he seems like he fell asleep, but then his limp body falls to the park bench. He's fucking dead? How the fuck did that happen? It's later revealed that in connecting fragments, the person who quietly killed him was none other than Takano. Wow, she must be feeling mad fucking petty if she follows him to another town and kills him. But I suppose she feels she needs to hold someone accountable for making her entire operation fail. This is the bad ending because Shion died before she was able to realize the error in her ways so that she could do better in the future, implying that Miakashi's events are going to repeat themselves again. However, with that bad ending discussed, Miakashi now comes completely to a close. Damn, can I just say that also Shion has a crazy kill count? I'm not Dead Meat or James A. Janice or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure outside of the Hinamizawa disaster, Shion has the highest kill count by far in the series. Now, it's time to ask ourselves the question of every timeline video. Is it canon? The answer, of course. Miakashi and Watanagashi are a part of the 8 official arcs after all, although as for where to place them, I'm not exactly sure because outside of Himatsubushi, none of them seem to have an obvious order to them. It's likely that Watanagashi takes place sometime after Onikakushi-hen, and I'm sure that Miakashi does in fact take place after Tomitake-hen, so we'll leave a little gap in the timeline for that arc. These arcs can absolutely be enjoyed through the anime, but I feel you're doing yourself a massive disservice if you don't go check out the visual novel, or at the bare minimum the manga. The manga is fantastic and it's a really short read. In the next video, whenever that may come out, we will be going over Tomitake-hen, also known as the Curse Killing chapter. There we will delve more into Satoshi's side of things, as well as explore Satoko's past. Thanks for watching and staying so patient, guys, and if you stayed all the way to the end, genuinely thank you so much. I know being a watcher of my channel can be frustrating sometimes, given how large gaps between uploads can be, but it's your dedication to me and my work that keep me going and creating. I would never be able to do this without your help.